This is how Cartoon Network described it when it came out. Oh brother, hold on to your jawbreakers because Ed, Edd and Eddy are back this November in a brand new feature-length movie. This time, Eddy has gone too far and pulled a prank that has the whole neighborhood gang after him, and only one person can save him. His legendary, never-before-seen older brother. Cartoon Network kicks off this fun Best of Ed, Edd and Eddy marathon and wraps up the night with a huge movie event. So round up your buddies for this hilarious premiere. So this was the promotion for when this movie was originally coming out. It was at the end of a huge marathon, and Cartoon Network really held Ed, Edd and Eddy highly. One of their most iconic shows of all time, and it's yet such a simple show about just kids growing up in this cul-de-sac called Peach Creek. So cul-de-sac's eerie, quiet, and the lane is completely destroyed. Ed, in a panic, rushes and immediately begins filling up one of his socks with his many belongings as he can, including his sponge collection, some buttered toast, and it's just something is clearly going on that's really intense, and we're just completely left in the dark about it. Meanwhile, at Double D's house, he's sobbing, and his belongings are all packed up as if he's never coming home, and he tries to write a letter explaining his incident to the parents, but is overcome with tears of guilt. We just keep getting more and more confused about what's going on. Like, usually an episode of Ed, Edd and Eddy is all about a scam, and this seems to be taking place after the scam, which is very intriguing. At Eddy's house, Eddy's seen packing up his personal items into a suitcase, panicking, and he hears somebody outside the back door. It feels like a horror movie at this point, but it's cinematic, so it feels good. Ed rushes in, hoisting Double D out of his sock, and they all hurry to escape. They sense the other kids coming and manage to hide in Eddy's brother's room, using the wallpaper to camouflage and disguise the door, though it's kind of poor. The dialogue is very slim up until this point. Keep forgetting that Ed, Edd and Eddy is a very storyboard-driven show. Like, the dialogue isn't as plot progressing as you would think. A lot of their content is very based on, like, Three Stooges, where it's a lot of slapstick humor, a lot of funny animations, and it's all about stretching the imagination from basic premise of just having kids growing up in a cul-de-sac. It kind of gives me a lot of Rugrats vibes. It's a bunch of kids and their imaginations gone like times 100, and it's always fun to watch, and it's just really cool. While the Eds cower in a corner, Eddy accuses their current situation of being Double D's fault. Eddy pushes Ed over to the door to listen to the other kids, using a glass to hear, but Ed startles him with a loud crunch as he begins eating the toast from his sock. Ew, this is disgusting. The noises cause the kids to discover where the Eds are hiding, and they break the door. Eddy and Double D desperately try to escape through the window and a heat vent, which are both closed off by bricks, and Ed attempts to ride away on a preserved camel in the room, which pitches him backwards into a fire alarm box marked "in case of movie break glass," which is a really funny joke.
Case of movie break glass!
Bingo! Eddy breaks open the box, but it only contains a peanut. Just then the kids manage to break open the door, enough for Ed to break open the peanut with anxiety, revealing that there's a key hidden in it. I don't know how they got that hidden in there, but okay. Eddy immediately recognizes that the key is to his brother's car. So the Eds pile in. Finally, all the kids rush in, but they are horribly maimed in one way or another. Like, Ralph's has much of his midsection bitten off. Oh my god, this is gross. Kevin is bruised and burned. Johnny's head is clenched by a bear trap. Plank is nicked and cracked, and Naz has most of her hair sheared off and is only wearing a cardboard box. Oh my god, I don't know what this prank was, but guys, this has gone way too far, clearly. Ed thrusts his feet into the car floor, but instead of driving the car, he actually smashes through the house with his feet through the bottom of the car, kind of doing it Flintstone style. The kids, meanwhile, pursue Ed in a wild chase through the cul-de-sac. Ralph nearly manages to drag Ed out of the car in this high-speed chase that isn't actually power-driven. And then the junkyard and the construction site, all the regular mainstay locations from the show. They do manage to catch the Eds, and in a brief moment, Ed and Double D pin the blame on each other, so it's clear that something's going on between them just as much as what they did. Kevin warns the dorks have not seen the last of him. So Kevin jumps on his bike with Naz following him, and they set off to go get the boys himself. I'm the most scared of Ralph in this moment, honestly. Sarah and Jimmy decide to follow as well, taking a picnic lunch just for the sake of watching the Eds get clobbered. So they don't really want to play a significant role in it. It just seems like they're all along for the ride. It kind of reminds me of some of those road trip movies where, like, you have all the characters going on their own individual adventure, and You know, so far it has that vibe because it's all the kids trying to attack the Eds, and the Eds are all trying to get away. I mean, that was like a lot of time just running through the regular mainstay of the cul-de-sac, and it's normal in a lot of feature films that the first 20 minutes is the ordinary world before we're breaking into the central plot. But it feels like the central plot was already set up, and this is just 20 minutes of us kind of living in that. Not a lot is revealed or new information in this first 20 minutes, so it does kind of feel like it drags on a little bit. Although this is when it gets a little interesting as the Eds finally leave the cul-de-sac. You know, I always feel like movies need to go beyond what the original episodic show sets up, and I like that they kind of do that immediately off the bat. Although I wish there was a little bit more dialogue-heavy scenes.
But smooth sailing!
The Eds, meanwhile, land in the desert, and their car shambles completely. They realize that they've fully escaped from the kids, but only for now. Eddy and Double D each vent their anger over the situation, and I don't know what's going on between these two. Their relationship is so strained in this so far, but I mean, that always is a good cause for conflict that keeps you watching. This is when Eddy introduces the idea of going to their brother's place, like this is the only guy that could help him, and Double D is a little doubtful, but he eventually agrees, because obviously there's not much options the boys have at this moment. Double D leaves a label on the car marked out of order, which is just, I think you're just excusing littering. Meanwhile, in the cul-de-sac, the kids are preparing to hunt for the Eds. Setting off on their own plans, Johnny and Plank actually become Captain Melonhead and Splinter the Wonderwood, which is exciting because their superhero alter egos from the show are coming into play. Johnny leaps up on his heroic escapade from roof to roof, scouring Peach Creek for the Eds, and all the kids are off to track them down. Meanwhile, Kevin is so harping on the Eds that Naz almost has issues with it, and it seems like these guys are more of a relationship than they've ever been in the actual show, like the way they kind of communicate, which I like a lot better. It seems like that's what this movie really needs, is a little bit more breathing room in terms of character development. Like, usually we don't have a lot of time to get into this huge ensemble of characters, but we do in this film. Like, we have an hour and a half, so let's buckle in. When they crash, Kevin apologizes profusely, and Naz tries to take it, but it turns out to be to the bike and not her. Ralph, after loading Wilfred with weaponry, rides off atop of the pig in pursuit for the Eds. He finds the wreck of the car in the desert, so after lunging out from behind a rock, armed with teeth and thrusting with his pitchfork, he shows Wilfred the scent so they could sniff out the Eds, and he follows on their trail, saying that he will have them by nightfall. The Eds, meanwhile, are marching through a field of cows, eagerly anticipating the arrival of Eddy's brother's plate. A little bit before, Kevin kind of insinuates that Eddy would never go to his brother because his brother would not be cool with it, almost giving us a little bit more concern for Eddy. Eddy reveals that though he's leading the way, he doesn't actually have a clue where his brother lives. The Eds think this is nuts until he pulls out a postcard for them to examine. Using a chart, Double D discovers that their past experiences with Eddy's brother's legacies, such as the stink bomb, a hot sauce recipe, and a fake treasure map, that his brother is a jokester, so of course he must be at the gag factory in the nearby town of Lemon Brook. Double D points out that Eddy's brother has to either work there or at the very least be a regular customer in the gag factory. Eddy thinks this is definitely true, so they all head over. Meanwhile, Sarah and Jimmy are skipping happily through the cul-de-sac, looking forward to their picnic lunch. But Jimmy accidentally enters the trailer park where the Kanker sisters live, and because of his bad experiences with the Kankers, Sarah runs off without him, but Jimmy musters up the courage and follows. Jimmy is trapped by the Kankers, and they start to torment him until Jimmy lets it slip that the Eds are actually in danger. Sarah comes in and challenges the Kankers, but she is no match for the three older girls, and is pinned down and tortured by a wet willy. Jimmy tells them that he knows upon seeing this and the Kankers that no harm will happen to their boyfriends, so he decides to hunt the other kids to help the Eds. So the Kanker sisters decide to go on the other kids' trail to help the Eds. Lee has a feeling that Sarah and Jimmy may know where the Eds are going, and so the Kankers hold them hostage while they travel, which is a really funny narrative. Meanwhile, the Eds are walking through the field of sunflowers, Ed and Eddy goof off, attempting to make a jerry-rig sextant to find the gag factory.
What's it called?
It's called a sextant, an astronomical instrument used to...
but they laugh at the word, and this is the closest they come to telling like a dialogue-based inappropriate joke. Eddy snickers and pretends not to hear what Eddy said. Real mature, guys. I mean, but this is what it's like to be a teenage boy, in all honesty. The Eds make it to the factory, where their attempts to break in via the back doors are unsuccessful, prompting them to try the front doors. And as they run around the front of the factory, the camera pans out to a fence of it, ominously marked with the sign that says "Keep Out." Ralph, in the meantime, has gone through the cow area and collects milk as a part of interrogation. I'm not sure how he interrogates, but this sounds perfect. Wilfred ends up following a link of sausages, which baits him into wandering off. Then at the factory, the Ed's broken into the front locked door, but the factory is deserted. It's not really in operation. Once they look at Ed's comic once again, they find out the factory has been out of business for a long time. Eddy and Ed amuse themselves with some of the leftover gags, and Double D attempts to look through the room to find any record of Eddy's brother, but all the papers have turned to dust, essentially, and heads to find Eddy and Ed, which they're being kind of disrespectful. I feel like Double D is doing all the work here, and they're almost acting like two children following their mom along on a road trip. You guys aren't acting realistic. I would be more forgiving if they were more focused on one of their own individual goals, but it just seems like they're just along for the ride, or like each character kind of takes turns being in the back seat to the plot, while one is guiding the way. When you think about the format of the actual show, you know, it's all about the scams, kind of them trying to pull it off, and I feel like most of the time is how it does or doesn't work pulling it off. Over focus on the visual gags and everything, although I am a little bored by some of it. Comical, like it just seems like a lot of hijinks, and I feel like they could at least go like super far with it. I saw this one episode where they turned Eddy into an egg and flipped him on a pan. Where's that? Found a little prank can of jelly beans with 1,000 spring-loaded snakes, and it actually bursts them out of the factory, taking Double D with them, of course, and it all showers down the countryside. Kevin and Naz are able to see this and figure out that it's the gag factory, so they immediately head toward the way. With Wilfred and Ralph only one step behind, they're now in the cow field. Still, when Wilfred revolts against Ralph, attacking in a frenzy and dropping all of Ralph's supplies before running to hide. Ed and Eddy, meanwhile, are searching for Double D, who is stuck at the top of a waterfall. I guess they all landed in different spots. Ed throws Eddy and Double D to dislodge him, but they tumble down the waterfall, both unharmed. He saves him with the trick his brother taught him, and then mentions that his brother is a whiz at harpooning whales, which Double D realizes that since Eddy's brother is a whaler, that maybe he's going to be living near the sea or somewhere near water, so the Eds actually decide to build a boat to follow the river. Meanwhile, Sarah and Jimmy come on out, and they're enslaved by the cankers, who are using them to draw their battle wagon. Jimmy and Sarah break free of the cankers thanks to a clever ploy on Sarah's part, slamming the paint can on Lee's hand. Meanwhile, Johnny and Plank are getting nowhere in their search for the Eds, but Plank decides they should start taking a bus. So despite Johnny's own reservations about getting on a bus, he ultimately is impressed by Plank's determination and declares, "Taking a bus to justice." Kevin and Naz arrive at the gag factory, and it's funny that like all the kids are just getting like an inch a bit closer, but it seems like nobody is going to get the Eds. Like, I should be more worried about the other kids, but they're not showing any threats. Like, I feel like the longer they're on screen and angry, the less effect it has. Like, at the beginning, it was really scary, and it's like, what's going on? But seeing them angry for this long throughout all these events is, like, loosening its impact, and I'm starting to slow down a little bit. Naz flirts with Kevin at the gag factory, but then she falls on a lever, and the factory actually starting up again, and the conveyor belt picks up Kevin's bike, and Naz tries to rescue it because she knows how much it means to him. Kevin manages to rescue his bike, but just as it's about to fall into a mulcher, Naz falls on top of him, knocking them both, and Kevin's bike into it. Oh my god, they're dead! No, I'm just kidding. The Eds sit on a waterfall, building their boat to freedom. To avoid disturbing the wildlife, the boat is in the shape of like a duck. I don't know why it has to look like that. It's SS Mutant, almost a chicken duck. And of course, Ed named that. Sarah and Jimmy are attempting to evade the pursuing cankers as they go through the sunflower field that the Eds were at before. Sarah and Jimmy end up finding Wilfred, and they use like a candy apple to befriend him and ride him out of the sunflowers and escaping the cankers. Meanwhile, Johnny and Plank are still on a bus. I feel like all the extra kids on their adventures toward the Eds also lowers the impact of the stakes, because it's like, it just feels like things aren't getting raised too much, and that's stressful for me. Down the river, Ed's boat ends up getting wrecked because of an unpredictable current that we just dodged watching, I guess. And he says that all he knows is that they're in a swamp in the middle of nowhere, and that his brother would not be impressed at a now ruined boat. Double D loses his cool because it's very disrespectful, and I see like a really big difference between Double D and Eddy now. Like, they're just these conjoined characters up until this point, but now we see that they have different values and morals, and it's coming out at like such a tension-driven time that I almost want to see them fight. I just need more action going on. While Eddy and Ed frolic around the swamp, Double D tries to maintain the order, and he's just giving too much to this at this point. Ed and Eddy suddenly fall into a pool of quicksand and begin sinking. When Double D tries to save them but fails, and then in a really depressing moment, Double D blames himself for their deaths, crying out in utter anguish. And we have a really dark moment where like we actually believe this could have possibly happened. Like, this is the last episode. Like, this is a really dramatic scene. Like, there's a chance this could have I mean, it's a kid's show. We know it wouldn't have. But still, like, the idea that it could have happened is really exciting. Or maybe the movie is just not building up momentum enough that I'm inventing stakes. Ed and Eddy reveal that it was all a joke, and they were only an ankle deep, and Double D is completely violated. He storms off, and him and Eddy go off at each other in the road. Essentially, like, their relationship has gone so bad since this. Like, they've been blaming each other all this time, and now it's kind of headed to a peak. Double D says that Eddy's desire to scam them is what brought them into the big trouble in the first place. Finally, we see like the resentment of all Double D has been doing for the boys boil up, and Eddy attacks back that he wasn't completely innocent either, and that he built the machine in the first place. And it's essentially kind of like taking away from the importance of all their inventions and scams and actually focusing on the characters. And that's a really active choice in this movie, which I really appreciate. Even if the slice of life plot doesn't necessarily translate to a feature film in a super simple way, it's nice to know that stakes are being raised, characters are being developed, and this is still going somewhere. We learn a little bit more about whatever that prank was earlier that we kind of forgot about, and they mentioned that like it's Eddy's fault because he pressed the red button, and I don't know if it was like a machine or like what even happened. Double D decides that he is heading home, to which Ed tries to stop, but like clearly like they're broken up at this point. Like, they're not friends anymore. Eddy is devastated and enraged, saying that he doesn't want to see Double D again, and it was all his fault, but he sinks into tears as we see him like completely break down. Eddy then, unlike something he's ever done before, admits that he is the one responsible for the failed scam that brought them here, calling himself a foul-up wannabe loser, and Double D is touched by Eddy's change of heart when he sees him cry, and they decide to make up and continue onward toward Eddy's brother's house. See, this moment, if this was built up a lot more, if this was like reminded a lot more, I think it would have been a lot more impactful. I definitely think this is the most memorable scene in the entire movie, and I remember this even when I was growing up at the time. Like, this was the part that it really takes it away, but looking back, it doesn't have the same impact I thought it did, because it's not building up. It just kind of explodes. They cry, they have an argument, like it doesn't feel like it's realistic like deterioration of a friendship. It feels like a single fight that happens for 2 minutes, and then it's kind of resolved. But the movie's not over yet, so why would we start talking about resolving it, The Eds continue on their long way, exhausted from the walk, and they end up with a group of fireflies. They call it quits at like this small abandoned park when everybody starts to settle in, including Double D, who labels everything in the vicinity. And the next morning, Kevin walks upwards on his bike, trying to comprehend what happened to Naz, like wondering if she was getting back to him for something that Kevin had no knowledge of. But spots of silhouette of someone appears to be Eddy, so Kevin runs off trying to focus on Eddy, and it's kind of like this deep metaphor for Kevin keeps chasing things that he has no control over. Like, he is going off in all these directions and at the fault of this person he really cares about, Naz. Like, he puts his bike before Naz, it's clear that he needs a little bit more character growth in order to get the Eds. The Eds go racing off for food, Ed and Double D following, and they run off a cliff. But they're saved by a Ferris wheel, and Ed's fear of heights overcomes him. He tries to escape, but the Ferris wheel launches the Eds directly to the amusement park sign. Double D notices that the sign they hit is Mondo a Go-Go, a image on the postcard that Eddy sent about his brother, which means that he actually lives at this park. Oh, thank God, this is finally wrapping up. Eddy's brother lives in that trailer nearby, and then Sarah, Jimmy, while still riding Wilfred, also seem to be heading towards the park. It seems like everything's about to come to a climax. Just as Eddy is about to knock on the door, the Cankers arrive too. They captured Ralph, Kevin, Naz, and all have them tied up. Wilfred, Jimmy, and Sarah come up, and the Eds are alive and well. Everybody is here at this park, but right as the moment they're about to get him, Eddy is at his brother's door. He opens it, his brother comes out, and instead of protecting him like everybody thought and everybody had hoped, that his brother ended up being this really cool. You meet Eddy's brother, and he makes jokes about the kids, calling out Double D as Eddy's girlfriend, and all the expectations of his brother is just completely tarnished. He's disrespectful, he's brutally mistreating his brother, and he even twists his leg around, and this guy's just such a jerk. He's such an older brother that doesn't care clearly about his younger brother, and all the kids seem to value Eddy in a different light, which is essentially what the show's about. It's just a scammer that's like trying so hard to connect with these kids, but he doesn't know how to, because clearly he has an older brother that's always been a bully. And then suddenly the entire show means a little bit more, because it kind of makes sense. It adds up. It's who Eddy is. Eddy is the only one who says he's not a big bad guy deep down, and that all he really wanted was friendship and recognition, something that his older brother never gave him. And oh my god, this is so emotionally sad. Suddenly all the kids come together and actually turn against Eddy's brother, and this is such a beautiful moment. Like, all of them standing up for him at adversity. Like, they've always hated Eddy. They were willing to like murder him at this point. I mean, I don't know if that's like a good thing or not, but in this moment, like, they're truly standing up for him, and it just shows about the unity that Ed and Eddy tries to create. Eddy finally admits that he made up everything he's ever said about his brother, and everybody somehow gets it. Everybody's moved by Eddy's apologies, and the kids and everybody get along one last time and celebrate. Even the Kanker sisters muse over Eddy's brother. Oh my god, my favorite joke is when Double D...
It only took 130 episodes, 4 specials, and a movie, Eddy.
Let's sing a song!
And everybody sings off into the end, and the TV screen says the end, and this is the absolute, like, I definitely think on paper this is the perfect movie. Like, if I saw the script, I'd be like, this is amazing. I just feel like the pacing and how it was carried out with the individual character goals was just so anticlimactic. I feel like the pacing of the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy movie kind of did it a little bit better. But Ed and Eddy did have a lot more emotional payoff, and even though it's slice of life, it did translate to the film in an impressive way. I think it would have been not necessary to be shown in theaters, but it's definitely an amazing send-off, let alone finale of a television show. It's almost like an amazing finale, but kind of a anticlimactic movie, if that makes sense. All around, like, I really enjoyed revisiting this. It definitely feels like the perfect cap on one of my favorite kids shows. I just wish it was as memorable as the show itself, and I feel like other movies have been able to do that successfully. And this, but I don't know, what do you guys think? Do you like Ed and Eddy, and how did you feel when the movie came out? Be sure to comment below and stick around, because Johnny 2000, I'm coming out with an Ed and Eddy video again soon. So I would love to know what you guys thought about this. Okay guys, have a great nostalgic day. Not a lot of movies about superheroes are super successful. Marvel came along later with the Iron Man in 2008, but this was at a time where like superhero movies weren't necessarily a prominent thing. It was kind of more in the TV world anyway. I know they had the Amazing Spider-Man, Batman the Animated Series. For some reason, superhero stories were only working in the TV format, and this is no exception. Powerpuff Girls Movie is essentially the beginning of the entire series, so I consider it the pilot. It's the 70-minute film, feels like it should be in theaters, but for some reason... Oh, no, it was. But the opening shots are actually really pretty. They're just like background art, but they look so vibrant and well drawn, especially for 2025. You could tell this was an early success for Cartoon Network because a lot of the aesthetics and artistic choices are falling in line with how Cartoon Network would inevitably be. For example, like you see a lot of those promos of like the characters in the streets, Billy and Mandy or Courage the Cowardly Dog, and they're all like walking through real world like scenarios. But it looks like a lot of the art from those promos are used in here. So it seems like the Powerpuff Girls movie did play a big part in establishing the identity of Cartoon Network and like what its brand would be. It definitely gives me vibes of like Dexter's Laboratory too. Like it looks a lot like that. So we're thrown into the world of Townsville, and everything is not really in a good spot. The professor is already scared to go to and from the grocery store in his own town, which is kind of a red flag. I don't know, Cartoon Network was really good at creating like a visual language that showed, hey, this is one of the cartoon TV shows. Even though this was essentially a film, the narrator's opening monologue is actually pretty poetic. It's like everything needs a little bit of spice and sugar, and it's talking about like the professor's life, and it's cool because it's like cartoons don't usually have time to do that in short form TV. It's usually just plot, but it seems like they're really good at texturizing all this dialogue so far in this movie. Then we cut to the abrupt opening of the whole thing, and it's like this stressful moment where a monkey is breaking everything in Professor Utonium's lab. The guy who created Samurai Jack also did the same art for this show, and it's very clear. Kind of similar to how Danny Phantom and Fairly Odd Parents have a really similar art style despite being very different shows. I mean, this show was a little bit of Samurai Jack, but you also can see the influences of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Craig McCracken, it was somehow like the perfect combination of the two guys' styles. The title sequence is short and prominent. It's just like literally the logo flying into a black void, which is, it's cute because we hear the girls laughing and giggling, so we already kind of know what's about to happen. After the girls are created, we get to see them in like everyday life, and I love that we actually have the time to do small things like this, like seeing the girls get adjusted to Townsville and their first uses of their powers. They even cut 3 holes into the house to establish that it's going to be their forever home. And it's funny because looking back, it seems like every origin in this show had an explanation to it. You know, like the way the house is set up, the way the town is established. It's very clear it started right here. We get that with a lot of pilots, but it's definitely not a thing for a lot of movies. I know something similar is like the Jimmy Neutron did a pilot type movie where it was the first thing we saw of the characters, and it was a feature length film as opposed to like an episodic plot line. So we didn't necessarily get the full feel of what the series would be, but we're definitely off to a good start. Their powers are like wondrous, and even when they go to preschool for the first time, the kids are excited to meet them. It's a very positive, you know, act 1 to act 2 transition as we start to get to know these girls. The guy Gennady Tarofsky, he's so good at adding silence into cartoons specifically. You know, we're used to a lot of fast-paced comedy dialogue, like there's never a piece of silence, but this guy, literally Samurai Jack, barely had any dialogue, and there's not music, there's sometimes subtle texture noise, like the girls floating. There's just a lot of silence. Silence is used very creatively in this show.
Now, let's begin. Hello, Professor, right on time.
I feel like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends started out doing it this well, and then they eventually got a little bit more quicker with it. As shows became a lot more produced, pilots became a lot more strict, and things just got a little bit rule-based. You could tell the fun and carefreeness is in this film because they're essentially doing things that we now would consider unnecessary, like small moments like that. I never noticed that we actually visually like identify with the professor. I'm not saying like we automatically identify as him, but I feel like the perspective of the movie is told from the professor's perspective because we care about the girls and their safety, which is like kind of the primary concern. We only really feel that they're already established that the Townsville is not a safe place. So seeing them like ease into this is really cute. Professor Utonium comes to pick up the girls and sees that the classroom is like super messy, and he's immediately convinced that it was the girls somehow, and he's like, oh my god, I'm so sorry for them, I didn't think this would happen. And the teacher says like, oh, this is just normal with preschoolers, which remind us that like the girls are actually, you know, just as real as like somebody you would find in real life. They're not different at all, and it's good at establishing that, especially for this next part. Get to see the girls interacting with the other guys and girls their age, and they all initiate in this game of tag. So basically they're taught what tag is, and it's kind of like a disease. And we see the girls get really competitive and actually start to see their like individual quirks come out. As before this, they've been kind of traveling as a unit as these super powered innocent girls. But now we see that there's Blossom, Buttercup, and Bubbles, who all have their distinct personality. Like Bubbles is the cutesy, crybaby one, Blossom is the natural leader, the morality compass, and then Buttercup, which is like the hot-headed, like can't control her temper type. And we see that they're competitive with each other and that they love to play games, and there's like a playfulness with this first experience of tag. It's so nostalgic to think of the first time you've ever played a game and how innocently they approach something like this. This is like one of their first social experiences. Like, we're seeing the girls actually figure out who they are through a competitiveness of like a fun little game. So the plot kind of kicks in a little bit here when the girls accidentally take this game of tag to the extreme, using all their superpowers to their advantage. And poor Townsville, like, things are getting even worse for it. I feel bad for the Townsville as a character. It feels like they're getting abused. But yeah, we basically get to see what it's like when you're a kid and you get to go out into the real world, but you know, you're not super socially cognizant of your surroundings, so you just act out. And it seems like the girls are just innocently having a good time here. And we get introduced to the mayor, who seems like he is staring out the window at the city getting destroyed and like kind of upset about it, but we learn that he's actually upset about a pickle and not necessarily Townsville. But luckily he has his secretary and the entire government to do the real work that he was gonna do. I think that led to that trope where it's like you see like a man in high of power in government and they are focused on clearly only themselves. It's like a funny trope that I think started coming back a lot more since then. We don't see this a lot in like Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network. These girls are struggling with a lot earlier identity issues. Like, there's just a different growing pain you have to deal with from the Powerpuff Girls position versus like Timmy Turner as a 5th grader. You know, like, I kind of feel bad for the professor a little bit more at this point because he's like definitely very apologetic. Like, he sits and he talks to them about using his powers. Like, they just destroyed the world and he doesn't seem like an inch mad at them, which is cool. This is like the perfect father figure. I like how Professor Utonium kind of takes accountability. Like, he's very much aware that they're girls, they're just growing, like everything they're doing is normal, and he is so reliable. He's like a good parental figure. The professor is calm, collected, and he's just a good father. And you feel a lot more empathetic toward him because it's like the girls are created, you know, they're like an experiment, and to see him take such a mentoring role for things that don't necessarily exist, like the Powerpuff Girls, I mean, I guess they do exist, but you know what I mean. It just shows a lot of care in a person to take this kind of approach. He says people get scared when they see something unique, and that is 100% the big dramatic question of this entire movie. This is going to be the exact theme that causes all the concurrent events to transpire. So put on your seatbelts. We're gonna keep going. When the girls go back to class, of course, the entire class is so upset with them. Even the teacher is like basically saying how they have to go to school with no recess and this broken down place as we look at the girls, and there's this really sad spotlight on them from a hole in the roof, and it's cinematic, it's beautiful, and we feel horrible for the girls. The time that they're taking to like really make us feel for the characters is really fun. Things take a turn for the worse as the mayor actually arrests the professor who just wants to pick up the girls from school. It's really funny because it's like, that's his only goal. He's just like, I gotta pick up the girls from school, and they're basically like, yep, come with us, you're in trouble. It makes me feel really bad for the professor because it's like he's just trying to do a good thing, but like, you kind of get it. Like, the Powerpuff Girls are kind of a threat to everyone. But you feel for the professor, like you're on his side, so it does feel like a higher weight is given to the girls, and like, we're more worried about him. The girls are waiting at school for the professor to pick them up, and he doesn't come, so the girls are really devastated. We get to see them in their second fight, and it's always funny to watch them fight because you can really tell the differences between them. Like, they're so distinct in their own ways.
Come on, girls.
And they have this new goal of like, okay, we're just gonna walk home, which is something that the professor really didn't want to happen, and we feel like the danger of that because they're like, oh my god, these girls are just clearly not going to use their powers. They're not going to fly home. They just were told not to use their powers, so now they're walking home in this dangerous city as like pre-K students. There's another really funny sequence where we get to see the news and see how much everybody really hates the Powerpuff Girls, like what's going on with the professor, and it's intertwined with the mayor basically calling out everybody to worry about pickles more than this situation at hand.
Pickle caught killing!
Freaks. Back to you, Linda.
The whole idea of like the main characters being left behind in like a really young and innocent way is something that Craig McCracken definitely did in the pilot for Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, which is also a really good pilot. I feel like it's just as good as this one. But like, it's funny that we are starting to see his identity. Like, I wonder what he was like growing up. Like, was that really something that was a big deal, as being left behind? Because that is, I mean, he beautifully weaves it into his storytelling. I'm not complaining. And the music is Like it's just clear this is like his show. Like I see the whimsical music, the witty dialogue, and the heart. It's so grounded in heart, and it's definitely somebody who made both Foster's Home and this show. Like I'm starting to see it a lot easier. I like that friendship is usually the themes, like being unique seems to be consistent in both of his shows. And poor girls are really upset because they see what it's like when everybody hates them. Something that no girl in pre-K should experience. But I guess we're living in the TikTok age, so who knows. The plot seems to follow their walk home here further. And it's really cool because that reminds me of like a road trip movie. Like you have one destination and the girls are just get their way home. Then they see Mojo Jojo for the first time. And he's just like a shadow, like these two eyes that peek out of the darkness. And that's a really cool first shot already. I mean, we saw him for a moment before, but this is like really his introduction. He like talks to the girls about what it's like to be a failure or to have uniqueness. Not necessarily be a good thing and really bite you in the butt. Of course, the girls really empathize with that. They're like, yeah, we know. Like, we were told that people find uniqueness scary. And this Jojo, the monkey, is taking essentially on the mentor role because now they don't really trust the professor as much as they did before they knew that he wasn't picking them up. From their perspective, the professor pretty much rejected them. They're convinced that the professor hates them. And that's the saddest part, I feel like. And I like how like the girls insist that this guy's good. Like they actually give Mojo a pep talk and are like, you know, you're definitely a good person. Even though he's blatantly telling them like, nope, I'm evil. I'm actually gonna destroy the world. They just seem to be like, no, you're not. I'm dwelling it down to sound like less intimate of a thing, but it's actually a really cute scene. We definitely can tell that he is kind of manipulating the girls. If you guys want to see more about manipulation in 2D cartoons, I recently made a video talking about my favorite arc in the old Kids WB Cartoon Network show Shaolin Showdown, and it's definitely worth watching, so please go check it out. And I love that the interaction with Mojo Jojo gives the girls the confidence to use their powers again. Like you see them fly up into the air and Mojo is so impressed and they suddenly have like this new relationship that the girls had never had before. It's their first experience with judgment, you know, like they meet somebody and they're like, okay, this is my judgment of this person based on what they know, and they don't know that much. They're like little girls. Like of course they're gonna have, you know, like their first impression of somebody before they know who to trust. Like you have to go wrong before you go right. Oh, and then I noticed this definitely that this is Craig McCracken's work when they're at the top of the volcano and the conversation is just going back and forth super quickly.
To harness the energy of the Earth's core for power.
What are you talking about?
The plan.
What plan?
Our plan.
To do what?
To make the town better, of course.
What?
Like they say a lot shorter phrases and they go through the characters quicker. It's a lot more natural of dialogue than any kid show I've really seen. And the girls actually help Mojo Jojo rebuild his tower, thinking that they're doing a nice thing with somebody who actually appreciates them. And so they really care about trying to make this guy happy because he's giving them positive reinforcement and they feel loved. I wish they made simple movies. When movie plots become more complex, it forces the characters to have to be simpler, and then the feelings like have to be even minuscule to none. Like there's not enough room for everything in there. So it feels like the more plots get complicated, the less characters have room to grow and the less feelings we could feel altogether. But if we pull back on our plot, like the Powerpuff Girls did, keep it super simple, we have room for more complex characters and even longer moments for small nuances like feelings.
He's not coming. He hates us. He totally hates us.
Writing feelings into a script is hard, especially when you're making complex plots all the time. And when you don't have those moments, the plots feel too fast. And film and TV just feels so fast nowadays. Like, of course there's not enough room to feel. What this does right is make the plot as simple as humanly possible. One thing leads to another based on the theme going on, which is uniqueness can make people scared. The best shows of kids content are good at making it breathe, having room for less complex characters, and even simpler plots so that way everything is digestible. The professor comes home and suffers pretty much because he was just beaten up in jail, I guess. This poor professor is like taking all the blame for all these girls' responsibilities. And he still has not gotten a chance to explain himself to them. And it's so sad because, of course, we know that they care about each other. They're just trying to get to each other. But there's so much in the way, and it's so much external issues like that are, it's almost toxic to their family and something they've built out of love so far in this movie. Then the girls think that they're actually successful, that their powers are going to be worth something, and maybe the professor will finally love them if they use their powers for good. The girls pick up Professor Utonium to show them what their powers did, how they helped Mojo Jojo, and meanwhile, Mojo Jojo was actually taking over the entire city of Townsville, like with all of his monkey friends. There's like a dialogue that's coincided with both, where it's like the girls are talking about how excited this new world is gonna be. Mojo Jojo is talking about how he pretty much owns this new world thanks to the help of the Powerpuff Girls, and they both basically hit each other at the same time. Powerpuff Girls are at the center of all of it. They've appointed Mojo Jojo.
Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, I couldn't have done it without ya!
The world is worse than it's ever been, and it's because of these girls using their powers. Like, there's nothing worse. To top off the darkest of the dark moment, Professor Utonium finally gives up on them, and it is, oh gosh, it's so heartbreaking.
Please believe us.
I don't know who to believe.
The girls don't even deal with it. They're just like, okay, we're out of here. They run away crying, and this is like one of the times where it's like very clear when there's like an act break, like this is the worst of the worst, and they actually are doing a good job cinematically telling us that this is like the beginning of the end, where they're looking through space and we see the asteroids, and we go to the girls, the Powerpuff Girls on the moon. They're like depressed and sad, sitting on the craters of the moon. Oh, I feel bad for them. Of course, they argue, and especially Blossom and Buttercup get into a really big argument, which kind of reminds me of Goku and Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z. Like, I mean, look at how similar these conversations feel. Okay, if you don't agree with me, whatever, comment below. They sit depressed until they hear the professor screaming from across the galaxy. What? They quickly jump off the moon and run all the way back to Earth. They're looking for the professor, trying to help him specifically, when they see so many worse things going on, and then they start to help other people, like save this kid's dog, save the baby. They start to inadvertently use their powers for something that a responsible person would use them for. And poor them, like they've never understood what is and isn't appropriate to use their powers for. Townsville doesn't know, and nobody's cutting them slack about it. The girls essentially have to take accountability for everybody else's issues. But it's really cool how like it just comes so naturally to them to do the right thing by helping all these people. And in a climactic moment, Mojo Jojo takes Chemical X, grabs the girls, and heads to the top of the mayor's building. In the end, like, the mayor congratulates them, the professor's proud of them, and everything seems to work out perfectly. And we get the narrator back. We get the first couple locations that we started out with in the movie, and it's a really sweet, conclusive ending as we start to transition with where Tom Kenny is basically the girl's narrator, and they come on in, and he talks as they just stand there in front of this beautiful heart-shaped background, and suddenly the show is officially established. This is the pilot episode of the Powerpuff Girls, essentially. Everything that happens in the regular show is after this, therefore this is the pilot episode. I know it's a movie, it was released theatrically, didn't do so well, but overall, like, this is such a beautiful film and a great start to a television show. I wish this almost was like integrated within the series. Like, it feels like one of those shows that just get thrown into the plot. But if you see the movie, you know that everything has a purpose, that everything is a little bit deeper than it was set out to be. And overall, it's just so good. I highly recommend watching this. If you ever had to watch the beginning to a show like Jimmy Neutron, there's just so many good 2000s cartoons to look at. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Johnny2000, and this is my channel. Don't forget to subscribe, like, I don't know, whatever you guys do on your free time. Do it to my channel. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Billy and Mandy's Big Boogey Adventure, essentially the Billy and Mandy movie. I recently did the Powerpuff Girls movie, and I was very inspired by the Cartoon Network style of storytelling, especially when it comes to features. I mean, it's really easy to create a cartoon that is without too much plot. I mean, I've seen a lot of the more recent SpongeBob movies do it. I've seen Fairly Odd Parents do it one too many times. Just to be able to do a feature film style story is a lot different than doing a 11-minute episode or even a 20-minute episode, which is as far as Billy and Mandy usually goes. I mean, obviously they have those 2-part episode, 40-minute ones, but this is entirely different. This is, fully 80 minutes. I consider it a feature-length film. Even though it didn't get in the theaters, it definitely should be taken as seriously as a feature film. So we start in the future with a dystopian Endsville. An evil known as the Lord of Horror orders robot duplicates, Billybot and Mandroid, to go back in time to eliminate Billy and Mandy and prevent them from reaching a powerful hand-like artifact in the Lord of Horror's possession before his past self does. Billy and Erwin of this time hope their past selves can actually stop the Lord of Horror's evil plans, and we're definitely really confused at what's going on right off the bat. I like that we start with everything is gone downhill, and even Billy and Erwin are at the worst of it. So could this end up being the future? I mean, obviously I want to stick around to find out. This is how I could tell this was a feature film, is when they had a really good committed opening. You know how films always have those cool montages with the cast and credits? Well, they did it in this episode. They do it in some specials, I've noticed, but this one does seem a little special. The animation is a little bit more Pixar. We see Grim in a giant monster car, the boogeyman sweeping up, and it says a stupid film. And it looks like a lot of people did this. Even C.H. Greenblatt, which did Chowder. We're taking to present-day Endsville and a nice, beautiful wide shot to show us exactly where we're going, which is a good differentiation from the show. It's a little bit more cinematic than just appearing at Billy's house like the usual shots they'd use. We get to see Grim in his daily life getting ready to take somebody else's life. It's so funny that the Grimm's daily job is to take people's lives. That is such a crazy thing that will never be done in a kid's show ever again. He goes to General Scar's house, which is a recurring character that's really good. He tries to defend himself and almost argue why he shouldn't be taken, and we haven't seen Grimm taking a lot of lives in a while, so it's cool to see this be reintroduced, especially in the finale of the episode, to remind us kind of where we're coming from. Billy and Mandy appear to distract Grimm from his daily opportunity, letting General Scar get away. We get a really fun car chase with a lot of comical moments, and get to see a lot more of Endsville than we usually do, which is definitely a cinematic type experience. And he eventually gets away. They end up defeated at Billy's house again. For some reason, Erwin shows up in a panda suit, and it's just not talked about that much. And Billy's dad gives Grim advice on losing a job, which is really funny because I didn't realize how many jobs he's lost looking back.
My dad starts a new job almost every week. Billy's right, Grim. I've been fired before. And it's not bad. In fact, I get fired all the time.
But Grim is just so fed up with the kids, reminding them that, the fact that they had this pact and he lost this race in order to be their best friend is inevitably why he's still there today. And of course, it's cool that we're coming back to this concept because it's been, that's the origins of the show, and we definitely don't talk about it too much. Mandy says that he's, the only one that really cares that he's not doing his job correctly, but it's interrupted when a bunch of underworld military people arrest Grim. They go to the underworld court with the same judge from the Keeper of the Reaper episode, which is one of my favorites, and they put Billy, Mandy, and Grim on trial, when really, it's about Grim, but Billy and Mandy are there. They basically accuse Grim of using his powers for the worst reasons, and it's just so true. They're talking about how many people have used his scythe. It's like working as a farmer and giving your tractor out to random people, like a schoolyard girl that's going to elementary school for the first year. That's just unreasonable. The kids and Grim are exiled at the underworld court, placed in the custody of Boogey. With Grim being stripped of his jobs, the boogeyman is playing a lawyer and essentially calling himself to the stand, which I don't think is legal at all. Genuinely, he's the boogeyman, his job is to scare people, and he does not do a good job at it, which is a really funny character trope. We see Dracula, who has a lot of funny comments. He is my favorite character in this show, as they're in the court. And even Fred Burger's here, which is my absolute favorite. The verdict of the jury is that Grim is guilty, so he will be stripped of all of his powers, and him and his quote-unquote accessories, which are the kids, will be sent to exile. So they're sent off with a bunch of other prisoners on the Boogeyman's ship. Meanwhile, General Scar is coming back from his chase with Grim and is greeted by the Billy and Mandy robot, and they vaporize him, so we should be scared already. The two robots take Billy and Mandy's life to kind of get an intel on their information and what they can do to get rid of them. And Billy's dad welcomes Billy, basically not knowing the difference, and their seed is planted. Meanwhile, Grim and his quote-unquote accessories and Fred Burger are on the ship. Grim is upset because it's like, of course, nobody could replace him, he's the Grim Reaper, but then number 3 from Kids Next Door comes in.
The immortal souls of grown-ups, collecting my dark harvest with a cold iron blade! Yeah, that'll be fun!
Boogey reveals his plan that he is going to be heading to the Isle of Terror to get Horror's hand, which is capable of giving the worst fears and coming to life. Boogey believes that with its power, he can become actually scary and rule the underworld, while Grim sees this as an opportunity to get his job back. Meanwhile, Mandy actually wants to collect the hand so she can rule. It's just everybody chasing after this one thing with the same goal, which is kind of cool. As they go from water to lava, everything becomes a lot more intense on the Boogeyman's hostile journey. Boogey has them walk the plank when Grim is like, no, don't make them do it, they're just kids. But he does it anyway. As Billy's the first one to do it, he breaks out into song, and this song is actually super catchy. Listen.
Stereo, stereo, I'm scared but not very though. Scary, scary, stereo, I'm not scared from head to toe. Well, I'm scared not very low. I'm afraid I'm not scared at all.
Not being kicked or keelhauled?
My goodness, he is so brave and tall.
There's no braver boy I can recall.
I don't know if I'm thankful or appalled.
The song is about how Billy is a little bit scared, but not that much. I don't know why we need to sing about that emotion. Meanwhile, Grim, Billy, Irwin, and Mandy escape on the death boat, exiting the ship. And we even get like a little thing at the side of the screen that makes it look like a music video that says Sergeant Pooper's Lonely Fart Club Sandwich, as if it's like a real music video. Meanwhile, Robot Billy and Mandy are fitting into the kids' normal lives, and Billy's dad still doesn't know the difference. And that's it. One of Boogey's pirates alerts him that Billy, Mandy, Grim, and all them, they got away. Like, they're on their way to the hand as well. But Boogey's not worried because he thinks that they're essentially going to die almost getting there. Grim has a meltdown and says basically he regrets everything that has ever happened in this show. And we get one more reference to the pilot episode, and Mandy kind of points out how he's going through the different stages of grief, which is a really impressive intertwine.
How could this happen?
Denial.
It's a mistake. No way this could happen.
Bargaining.
It's okay. It's okay.
After this whole dramatic moment is over, they get to the gate. It allows them to get to the hand, and they're stopped because, you know, there's a guy that's making them go through. We get to see Grim's ID. The underworld has an ID system, but that's kind of funny. They say that they can't let them through the gate unless they complete a test, and everybody's kind of scared because, like, what could that be? They send out a troll that kind of looks like an ogre with a giant beating stick. The ogre eats the 4, and they say that they passed the test. What could that possibly mean? After a commercial break, we find them in the ogre's lair, or troll, I don't know what to call them, and they are being made into soup, ready to be eaten. Mandy ends up using Billy's flatulence to get out of the soup, tricking the ogre that they actually ruined the soup. The gatekeeper and the ogre attempt to eat them, but they get away. They're running around the room with the eyeball that allows both of them to see and throw it around like a football. This worries Boogey, who's watching the entire thing from the eye of the gatekeepers. Meanwhile, Robot Billy and Mandy come back to report to Boogey. I believe it was mentioned earlier that Boogey is actually the one in control of these robots, meaning that I think that he's the one in the beginning in the dystopian world that set them out. The robots report to Boogey, and everybody's disappointed because they have not gotten information, and apparently they've only retrieved emotion. A giant cake floats to Billy, Mandy, Grim, and Irwin, saying happy birthday Billy and Mandy, and it's clearly something suspicious. Mandy immediately suspects it, but the boys eat anyway. The trick is completely fallen for, and the cake actually allows everybody to pass out. There's a cool cinematic moment where Mandy is watching herself. Essentially, everything gets blurry, and I think that's a cool idea. It turns out to be by the robots assisting Boogey. So we go into the darkest fears of all the main characters in their own nightmares as they are asleep. Everybody's is so significantly weird. Like, Billy's running on a horse of Grimm through space. I don't really know what to make of this, but it's fun that we got the wacky, absurd humor that the show is known for in this. Erwin is tied to a chair watching a giant axe swing above him, which is also kind of freaky. And number 3 makes another appearance, which is so funny. Boogey shows up in the nightmares and actually takes Mandy. As Grimm, Erwin, and Billy are falling, Erwin begs Billy to pee his pants because that usually wakes him up from a dream. It's successful, and they all come back to reality, but Mandy is still missing. Billy gets literally another piece of the cake again, which is a very Billy, and Erwin has had enough now that Mandy's stolen. She's tied to the front of the Boogeyman ship, and he asks Mandy to join him, but Mandy just refuses. I'm not sure Mandy's morality compass, because she wants to be evil herself, yet she doesn't want to work with Boogeyman. So it's just weird because it's like she's kind of loyal to Grimm, but she's also willing to step above Grimm for her own selfish power. I'm not really understanding what her code of ethics is here, especially because she's like, I'll never work with you. And it's like, well, you're willing to go evil by yourself, so I'm thinking you're definitely willing to do something like that. We cut to Mandy waking up from her own nightmares, thinking that everything that just happened was a dream. But it leads to another nightmare where she's with Billy, Grimm, and Erwin, but they're not actually them. They're some deformed monster. And then it transformed into all these evil unicorns attacking Mandy, and then she wakes up into a black void, and it turns out that she was having a nightmare while still on the Boogeyman ship. That was a hard one to gather. Seems like the tone of this is a lot about people's fears and nightmares, which is funny because that's exactly what's driving the Boogeyman. He's scared of people not actually fearing him, so he has to act like a jerk just to make up for that insecurity. Erwin comes onto the ship and saves Mandy by defeating all the crew villains, kind of like a video game, and Billy and Grimm watch. I kind of wish this was a musical number because the one with Billy was pretty good, and I feel like if we had this too, that would even be better. They save Mandy, who is now still asleep, and Erwin kisses her to wake her up. I think this kiss kind of confirms Erwin's arc, but I don't know. After Mandy throws up, her robot counterpart comes up against her, and the two face off, with the robot clearly not matched up to Mandy's evil. Mandy takes the laser that the robot Mandy was holding and uses the laser as a diversion for all of them to get back off of their ship and onto their own boat. They get to the island of peril, where they walk up these long, winding stairs to the Hand of Terror. So they get to Horror the Ancient, which guards the Hand of Terror, and he gives a little bit of lore saying that he concentrated all his evil to his left hand, then cut it off. It's a weird story, but I also wish we got a little bit insight into his life, because that would be a really compelling backstory. They say that in order to get the Hand of Terror, that they are going to battle him in a game of wits. He tells them that during the battle, he will try to strike him with his spear, which is not fair, bro. Erwin starts talking to this guy on a personal level, and they really bond for a moment, but then the guy gets even more angry. The guy says that if he gets defeated, they're gonna have to suffer their greatest fear anyway. And Billy is taken by a giant squid. Boogey shows up last minute, putting an anchor on Erwin. Boogey is here ready to get Horror's hand. They come to a stalemate when they both get to the Hand of Horror, and the ancient guy tells them that they could face off in Cannibal's Run, which is a race through the underworld, and the winner will get a chance to fight the Ancient Man and get a chance to get the Hand of Horror. Without Billy, it's time to race the Boogeyman on his ship, and it's clear that he is definitely going to win. Mandy has a moment where she misses Billy because they don't hear anything from him, but it's taken away quickly after the act break as Billy just comes back from the squid, which is kind of anticlimactic. I wish we had more of a moment for everybody to miss Billy. Like, these emotional beats are those things that are supposed to make a film breathe as opposed to plot to plot to plot, which is kind of sad because the emotional beats are the part we're here for, but they just want to focus on the comedy and the humor. I don't know, that's just kind of their decision. Billy's back in time for the race, and they all begin. Cannibal's Run. Boogey tries to play unfair and attack the other ship, but Billy saves them. They end up going through this giant portal, which adds them all being puppets, and it's really funny because they've done this before, but this is funny. I like that all these Cartoon Network shows have a reference to puppets one way or another, like Chowder does it a lot. I've seen this show do it before. And maybe I'm also thinking of Channel Chasers from Fairly Odd Parents, but, it's funny. It seems like each of these locations are more of small bits, especially considering that, everything in the movie thus far is a different trial and tribulation, and then now we're going into like a speed run. As the race continues, they go through a bunch of different puzzling spots, and even the two cyborgs, Mandy and Billy, are on Boogey's ship still. I call them Boogey. In the end, Grim gets to the race first, leaving Boogey behind. Boogey is obviously really angry, which makes sense. Finally, our main characters get the hand and are forced to face their biggest fears. It just feels like everything is one thing after another. We get a little moment where we see everybody's fears, and it's just a comedy situation because it's like Erwin doing stand-up in front of bears, Billy facing a clown, and Mandy facing her grandmother, or a fat version of herself, which is kind of disrespectful. Finally, Grim gets the hand of horror, and it's back to normal. But in a last-minute effort, Boogey steals it. He uses it to erase Grim, and we don't know where he went. And he's celebrating, but, you know, what happened to Grim? Grim reappears, and Grim starts laughing at the Boogeyman. It turns out that this is all a part of the Boogeyman's fear since he's holding the Hand of Terrors. He just doesn't want to be laughed at, and the fact that Grim's laughing at him actually defeats him, which is a really cool way to take down the villain. The villain is defeated by his own fear, because Billy, Mandy, Erwin, and Grim really drive it home that he's not scary, and it's finally the thing that defeats him, which is really rewarding. Everybody laughs as he falls down and gets run over by a train. This is a little cruel, guys. I mean, this show's been known to be cynical, but watching Boogey die in multiple ways is kind of intense. Turns out Grim is actually really scary because he's not afraid of his own fears, which is a really interesting concept. They all talk about what they're gonna do with the hand, but inevitably, everybody celebrates because they got the hand, and everything is all right. And the judge comes back for one last sentence. He says he's going to banish them forever, and the plot's not over yet, it seems. Quick commercial break, and we're back at it. So the main characters are at the hands of the judge once again, and Mandy demands that Grim gets his job back. Grim celebrates, gets his scythe back, and his power. Then future Billy appears back, and I'm not sure if this is super relevant, but he's naked. Grim says he's going to destroy the Hand of Terror so nobody has to ever use it again, which is totally a good thing to do. I don't know why Grim says he's evil. Grim and Mandy have a moment where they say they shouldn't be afraid of their feelings, and it's kind of insightful for a second. This all turns out to be a TV show watched by Billy and Mandy the robots, ending the entire movie. I definitely think this is a really good movie. I feel like it could have done a lot better if every trial and tribulation Billy and Mandy went through prior to the race was a reflection of their fears in a non-direct way. Like, people kept saying fears, but I feel like we needed to know what the biggest issue with each character was and why that was tested, as opposed to being so literally just thrown out, and be more comedic as opposed to a character-developed issue. I mean, of course, I feel like everybody on the writing team felt a little spoiled because they had 6 years to grow these characters, and they're like, let's just have fun for this one. And I definitely think fun was had, and I think it was a great special, but I do think the emotional depth was more necessary, and they didn't try to hit it so much. It seems like they were just so excited to get so many events in this hour and 20-minute film that they forgot about the character growth and the emotion. I mean, they made up for it in the sense that they kept falling back to the original reason that Grim was here. They leaned into the fears, like the Boogeyman's fears, Mandy and Billy's fears, but they only came in sparsely in a beat at a time, and none of them lasted for too long. Like when Mandy missed Billy, that could have been a really impactful moment, but since it was so brief and far in between, and we never built up to seeing why that relationship was so important specifically throughout this special, like it just felt like it was like a come and go type thing. And I definitely also think the antagonist could have had a more intense motivation, or even a bigger looming threat. Of course, like, the entire underworld, Grim losing his powers, is super high stakes, and that's great, but it seemed like the judge was stronger than the Boogeyman somehow. And I think the SpongeBob movie did a better job in the sense that they had a threat that was threatening the entire world and not just the underworld, or they're all stuck here at one time. I mean, it feels like we aren't really worried with all the mortality issues throughout the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy series, that people are gonna die, or that there's like a huge risk to things, but I do think that could have been implemented better. The Powerpuff Girls did a great job at making Mojo Jojo threatening and manipulative in a really earned way, as opposed to just a recurring character coming back for another round. With all this to say, it is definitely a really good TV movie. I think it could have been a better feature film movie. Powerpuff Girls was a good feature film movie and worked as a TV movie, but I wish Billy and Mandy was used as a feature film format, because the best parts of this are the parts that lean toward it being a feature film format. The more they lean back into it being like an episode of the show is where it had its weakest points. But overall, I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. I think they could have done better, but I don't think it was bad, and I think it's a good way to end the series and recycle the original plot lines to what brought Billy and Mandy together to begin with, and, you know, all around just a very interesting movie. Not as memorable as I would hoped, but it was worth the ride. Have you guys seen this recently? Do you remember it? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Johnny2000, and for more 2000s content, don't forget to like and subscribe to Johnny2000. Okay, guys, have a great day. Have you ever watched a TV movie and been like, oh my god, why is this just a TV movie? It's like actually so good. It's cinematic, there's story elements of a feature film, the characters have a lot of growth. Like, this doesn't only need to be fit to this medium screen. I feel that a lot, especially recently as I've been watching a lot more Cartoon Network specials, from finales to pilots. Cartoon Network has really done a good job at crafting feature-length narratives that really do justice to its characters. While not everyone has been perfect, and I feel like some have some really glaring issues, I do think it's important to revisit them. Whether it's the origin stories, like the Powerpuff Girls, or finales, like Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy and Ed, Edd and Eddy. But this one was very impactful. It was another Craig McCracken one. The Powerpuff Girls did a really good job at establishing characters for the first time, situations that the world might be dealing with, and it translates really well to his new show, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. I know it sounds funny because I'm saying new when really it went on for 6 seasons, like literally 10 years ago, but every franchise starts somewhere, and the same way the Powerpuff Girls started with a feature-length pilot, essentially Foster's Home copied this. We talked a little bit about the commercial failure of the Powerpuff Girls, but we're not really going to get into it super much, but it definitely explains probably why this pilot of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends was a feature-length episode, but didn't get the feature treatment, especially not getting put in theaters. And this one is, I was going to put this in the pilots video I made for Cartoon Network, but I feel like it just didn't do it justice. Like, this wasn't just a pilot. This is a full-length, like, really good movie. I sometimes would even think that it got better than the Powerpuff Girls. But hey, let's not get too into it. Without further ado, this is Johnny2000, and let's break out some more 2000s nostalgia. What's up, everybody? It's Johnny2000. So we're going to be talking today about House of Bloos, which is the official pilot for Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. About 80 minutes in length, it's split up into 3 24-minute episodes to kind of fit the broadcast time and be normal episodes of the show. So instead of starting at episode 1 of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, we essentially get 3 episodes, and they did a movie, so it seems like from a business standpoint, these guys are all satisfied. There's a lot going on in this, so let's break it down. We see Blue and Mac being attacked by a dark shadow that turns out to be Francis, Mac's brother. He runs around the house chasing him, and it gives me a lot of Fairly OddParents vibes, like how Vicky was with Timmy Turner. This was kind of the same relationship. This kid literally takes Mac and his imaginary friend and swings them across the room. Like, this guy is so abusive in a way that I've never seen in a kid's TV show. Like, Francis is diabolical. He also kind of reminds me of Roderick from Diary of a Wimpy Kid, if anybody has seen that. Like, I could totally see this being a Diary of a Wimpy Kid world. The mom comes in and she's actually angry at Mac and Blue for getting bullied, but then it turns out that the mom actually is fair and she calls out Francis on him.
And I expect him to act like the oldest and set a good example by telling the truth.
Ha! But Mommy, I was telling...
Terrence, you expect me to believe that a 13-year-old boy was overpowered by an 8-year-old and his cute little imaginary friend?
So we respect this woman. It's interesting that they never show us her face. Like, we've seen so many characters throughout this entire series, and we never saw Mac's mom's face. Not that I want to, I'm just saying. Mac's mom tells Mac that they need to talk, and Blue overhears as Mac's mom explains why he needs to let go of having an imaginary friend. Like, he's becoming too old for this. It's kind of like a metaphor for, like, growing up and needing to let go of things. Some of the most generic plots, in a good way, though. I love how seriously it's taken. Like, the emotion is so real. And somebody telling their son they need to let go of their best friend, like that would have been my worst nightmare at that age. Oh, it's so sad immediately. We get a little funny sequence where little Blue is watching TV and everybody's talking about abandonment and he's like, well, I guess this is my life. He sees a commercial though about Foster's Home, an imaginary friend palace where all the imaginary friends that get left behind live, kind of like an orphanage for friends. I don't know if that's like a proper way to say it though. Mac and Blue decide they want to check out the place, and they're greeted by Mr. Harriman, this large butler-like rabbit.
The head of business affairs at this facility, and am in no way a butler or any other member of the service trade.
The fact that Blue knows he's about to be abandoned, so he's asking Mac to take him to a new shelter to live, is a really dark concept for a kid's show. I don't know if you guys have heard, but they're doing a spin-off show, like a preschool track show with Craig McCracken and the creator of the show, and I wonder if they're gonna bring this up. So Mr. Harriman thinks that the boys are there for a tour, so he has Miss Frances come take them on one. She comes down like a maid. She's kind of like the older sister to the main cast already, and it feels like that kind of dynamic immediately, because she just takes care of the house, and she seems to really enjoy what she does. I don't know, she's a really respectable character, and I guess we kind of feel it like right off the bat. Like, we definitely like Miss Frances. Will takes Mac and Blue on the whole tour of the place, and it's just a lot of comedic sequences, but like also funny realities that there are so many different unique rooms that encapsulate like thousands of different personalities. I don't know, it's kind of sweet to think that this is a representation of like, oh, the weirdest and most unique people all exist under the same house, and these unique rooms that is almost like a community of people that are inherently very different from each other. And I like how we're still talking about Madame Foster, like this really powerful woman that is so powerful we never even get to see her, and yet she decides what goes on in the house. It's her home. She makes the rules. Like, it's just godlike figure. Throughout the tour, we get to know a little bit more about Madame Foster. Like, the music is so cute for this. I don't mind it going on for like 3 full minutes, and the montage is interesting enough that we're like really getting a vibe for the whole house. Wilt mentions that there's also some really bad imagined friends, and we meet Duchess, a really stubborn, elderly woman type person. I don't even know what her personality is.
She's ugly.
She's evil. She is indeed.
We see a glimpse of a scary purple monster that continues to come out, but it's too shy to approach them until one of the dangerous imaginary friends actually threatens Mac's life and picks him up from the ground. But this monster comes in to save him, and his name's Eduardo. Blue immediately jumps on him and bites him as his instinct. I don't know why he thinks this is the correct thing to do in this situation. Defending Mac. It's interesting to think that they're also like slowly telling us there's some really dark things going on here, that like, we got some great personalities, but we also have some interesting personalities. I don't know. That's what I'm being communicated with right now. Mac is excited because this is a win-win for everybody. Like, Blue can live here, he could live there, and they could stay friends. It's so cute, the amount this kid is willing to go to keep his friend in his life. Like, it's definitely the ultimate goal to have a character be like, oh, my entire obstacle in life is making sure I have time with my friends. It's like, there's something wholesome about that. But unfortunately, the friends break it to them that that's not how it works. That if Blue has to stay here, it means he's officially up for adoption. So somebody can go ahead and take him away at any point. Wow, these are really dark rules. Blue is like, okay, I'm gonna try to stay here. And Mac is worried, but he doesn't really have a choice. He tells him like, okay, I'm gonna have to be back tomorrow. But Miss Frances says, like, if you're not back by 4 o'clock, I think it is, you're going to be leaving your friend vulnerable to be adopted. So, like, we'll keep him here for you, but as of 4 p.m. tomorrow, like, it's out of our hands. Blue is terrified, and it is so sad to see that Mac has to leave him there for the night at this strange new place. It's really depressing. Seeing Mr. Harriman be such a cynical person, being like, yep, he's never coming back, with like no apologies, it's like kind of dark. We end part 1 in anticipation. Will Mac return at 2 p.m. before Blue will be adopted, or will something happen? Ooh, it's exciting because it works as the first act of a movie and a part 1 of a TV show. Like, what? It's the best of both worlds. Blue wakes up and he's like already really nervous that Mac is not going to be showing up. Mac is watching a picture of Blue, so we know that he's definitely intending to go back. But there's just something off. Like, there's just sadness in both of their hearts because, of course, like, this is the first time they have to spend time apart. Like being an adult stinks. Oh God, that got existential. So the next morning, it's adoption day, and there's a family that actually is really interested in Blue. Miss Francis introduces herself, and we get to see that this is a bratty little girl that doesn't really have any empathy for other characters. She just wants a friend as a sort of like a trophy, which is an interesting concept, that she sees them as this like social currency that she feels entitled to. Oh my God, what the heck, this little girl, why is she so dynamic? Duchess introduces herself as like, oh, this is the right kind of family, they're rich. And they kind of go along with it as if it's gonna happen. But meanwhile, it's like the little girl clearly wants Blue. She wants to adopt Blue. So Blue's trying not to be adopted, but clearly perfect for what this girl wants. Like something she can manipulate, something simple like Blue. And while Mac is like going through his normal daily life, Blue is fighting for survival to not become somebody else's best friend. Have you guys been there before? Because I have. Blue and all his new friends, and this is adorable, they all are helping him get away from this little girl in this running around the house sequence, and they're just trying to keep a distance between Blue and this little girl because obviously she might adopt him just on time. And this is so depressing that, like, of course this girl just wants to use this guy as a friend, and everyone around him is just like, yeah, I guess if it's just paperwork, it's paperwork. Speaking of paperwork, Frankie and Mr. Harriman are signing away Blue's adopted papers, but right before they could sign, Mac shows up, saves the day. After Blue successfully gets away from the bratty little girl, we find out that Terrence is watching where Mac has been going. You remember Terrence, obviously, the big bully in the house? He meets up with Duchess, and the two have like such a really weird chemistry. They both have common enemies, which is Blue and Mac. Duchess is mad because obviously she could have went with that family if Blue hadn't ruined it, which I don't think is true, Duchess. They make a plot together, and it brings us to part 3. Terrence visits Mac in his room basically to tell him that he knows what he's been up to. He locks him in the closet, and it's very clear what the plan is about to become. Suddenly it's about to be 4 o'clock the next day, and Mac has not shown up. We see Blue depressed, and his new friends are just as disappointed. When they think Mac shows up, it turns out to be Terrence, Mac's older brother. He poses to be like a really nice and considerate kid, and Mr. Harriman does not realize what he's dealing with. We see a really stressful moment where Mac is trying to get out of the closet to get to Blue, but meanwhile Terrence is filing the final paperwork. Yeah, the worst possible scenario of who Blue could be adopted by. Mac is able to get out of the closet by attaching a magnet to a key, and meanwhile, Duchess is getting ready for something worse. She goes up to the monster that hurt Mac earlier and releases him. Mac shows up, and all the friends are mad at him. Even Coco has a speech.
It's fine. Now look, we gotta try and get him back, cause... You go, girl!
And he explains what happened. Mr. Harriman doesn't believe him, but tries to warn them about Terrence's plan. They show up at this junkyard where Terrence brings Blue hostage, and Duchess reveals her plan to get rid of him. There's a funny dialogue between Terrence and Blue, and this show is just so impressive with its dialogue writing. I said it during the Powerpuff Girls, but like the awkward, like quick, short phrases, it's really good.
If everyone is saying blue hoo, that means they're crying, right? That means they obviously remember me, so I won't be forgotten.
Right, because if they're crying, they must miss you. And to miss you, they have to remember you. So they'll remember to not forget.
No, you had it. You can't forget what you remember, so...
No!
This giant monster comes up, and it kind of looks like evil Pac-Man, ? And it begins to try to devour Blue. Blue runs away around the yard, but his friends all show up just in time with a unicorn. I mean, I guess it's important because it's like we want to embrace the imaginary friends, and of course most would be unicorns. But things take a turn when the monster goes after everyone. Mac finds a way to defeat him by taking all of his legs and trapping them, all the bombs of his legs, and trapping them in Coco's eggs. This montage is really fun because it's an action sequence in a more comedic-based show. Like, it made sense in Powerpuff Girls, but here it's just like, there's a lot of chase scenes, there's a lot of comedic moments, and it really draws back to the setup of the story, which I'm so happy they are very serious about how this goes. We get to see everybody's unique ability, like Eduardo's ability to be super friendly, Wilt's ability to use basketball, that was all introduced in the first part of this 3-part episode. And we get to see a little bit more of everybody, all while doing it in a really fun way. Even Duchess and Terrence have some funny dialogue as they're watching on the sidelines like a football game.
There, do something! Shut up, will ya? I'm trying to watch this.
They all work together and save Blue. Finally, the evil monster turns against Terrence and Duchess and eats them. And just when you think it's all over, Blue is still being chased by this giant Pac-Man. It's funny because he literally is a ghost, so I bet the writers knew what they were doing here. And Duchess gets in absolute trouble. Mr. Harriman and Frankie have one last argument about why these rules shouldn't be in place, but we're interrupted by the almighty Madam Foster. Yes, finally, Miss Foster is making her appearance. And it's very powerful because she uses her one and only moment to give permission to Blue and Mac that Blue could live there and Mac could come visit him, which is all they've ever wanted. And of course, Madam Foster is super short, just like the mayor. For some reason, Craig McCracken thinks that the almighty people need to be short. I don't know why that's necessary, but I like it. And we calm the climax with one last funny bit of dialogue.
Oh, okay. What? Okay.
Okay, what?
It's okay. You mean, yeah.
Really?
Sure, you're kidding. No, he can, yeah.
And I won't be?
Nah. Really? Yes. How many times do I have to say it?
And finally, this 3-part episode comes to a close. We have Terrence and Duchess taken down. The evil bratty girl doesn't get away with Blue, and Mac is finally able to juggle friendship and his adult responsibilities responsibly. I mean, you could say that grammatically correct, you know what I mean. Everything feels so well-deserved, and the stakes are raised at such an even pace that there's enough comedy and enough escalating issues for us to come back to this resolve. I actually had a lot of trouble finding this special. Like, I had DVDs of this 3-part. Sure, it was on streaming services, but it's not really easy to get my videos that way. I tried through DVD means, where I have the first 3 episodes, but that also was like impossible to somehow get to my computer. With a bunch of research and all these online places, it almost was like finding House of Blues was impossible. And it shouldn't be. It should be accessible, it should be easy to find. If it was a feature film, it would be a lot easier to find, like the Powerpuff Girls was, versus like one random obscure episode in the middle of the series. So thank you guys for your patience, because I've been wanting to do this one for a while. And that was the pilot for Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. I can't believe how impressive this special is and how well it holds up for what it is. Like, we get to know Mac, Blue, Mac's brother, Mr. Harriman, all the main characters of Foster's, all in this hour and a half. I think it's only impressive because of the fact they were given this amount of time. I don't think there's a world where this would have been fit into one episode. Like, if they had an official pilot, it probably would have thrown us into a scenario with the characters, but the fact that there's a little bit of a backstory that is always held through the rest of the series is really important. Obviously, Craig McCracken has done it before with Chemical X and the Powerpuff Girls. Like, he just likes to have a hard hand in the lore that leads up to the start of the show, and I really respect that. Not many people get the opportunity to do that. Usually they sell a show and it's like, oh cool, we get to jump into it in an audience-friendly manner, but this was a very artistically friendly manner where we actually took our time. This is the perfect template for what a Cartoon Network movie should be. I think the only thing they're missing was a theatrical release. But what do you guys think? Has it been a while since you guys have seen this? I would love to know more about how this rings a bell for you and what you guys think of this compared to the other movies. This is Johnny 2000. Thank you guys so much for watching. Cartoon Network has committed to doing a lot of actual TV films. Not just 40-minute, there's a normal segment, which is 10 minutes, there's the normal episode, which is 2 segments of 20 minutes, there's double episodes, which are 40 minutes, But then there's feature films, which are anything over an hour, and Cartoon Network has done a really good job at committing to make a full feature, whether it be Billy and Mandy, the Powerpuff Girls, or even Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. They've done a really good job in the past of putting a feature-length TV movie onto their network. And while this has been super successful in the past, there are definitely frauds out there. And frauds as in two-part episodes that disguise themselves as TV movies, just like the latter, but aren't actually that, whether it be because of the structure or because of something else. And that is exactly what we're gonna see as we dive into Where's Laszlo? Camp Laszlo has always had a place in my heart because it was one of those cartoons about an optimistic main character surrounded by negative characters. Back when this came out, it was exciting because up until this point, Camp Laszlo had never had a two-part episode, let alone a 40-minute special. They usually did 2 segments into a normal episode.
I wish I never said that I didn't care if I saw him again.
So this essentially is a 4-episode segment. The full 45-minute episode has yet to receive an official release. Okay, so the story opens with Laszlo gone. Raj reminisces about the first time they ever went to camp, and it's cool that this episode takes us back to the very first moment these guys came to the camp, because that's not what the pilot ended up doing. We see Raj as a little kid on the bus ridden by Slinkman. He picks up Raj, then he picks up Clam. And the two don't like each other immediately, which is kind of surprising. Clam even tries to sit on the roof. When they get to Camp Kidney, it seems like all the other scouts are already there. They even have a really funny greaser montage where they're snapping their fingers and walking toward them. But it takes us back to reality when we learn Edward is immediately a bully and takes away Raj's book, which is Do You Know the Muffin Man, which is interesting character choice. They give a hail to Scoutmaster Lumpus in his quote-unquote first appearance.
All hail Scoutmaster Lumpus, all wise and courageous leader, supreme
All right, that's enough.
He's kind of strict, but also very klutzy. A giant fruit truck shaped like a banana rides onto Camp Kidney, and it surprisingly has a box with a monkey in it, and that monkey is Laszlo with fruits on his head, and he has a really awesome dance. Of course, this is Tom Kenny, the same voice as SpongeBob, so it's no doubt that I keep connecting the two.
Covered with fruit flies. It's disgusting. I wish we had flies. Yeah.
Here, you can have mine.
Thanks, Laszlo.
And until I watched it again, I never realized the connection to SpongeBob it had, not just in the animation, but the fact that Tom Kenny plays like 2 or 3 of these main characters. Not only that, Mr. Lawrence is in this too. Mr. Lawrence is Plankton from SpongeBob, and he plays Edward in this show.
Maybe we should fly it back to your grandmother. No, please.
If you don't remember, Edward is kind of like Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, this like really snooty character that serves as like the antagonist. He plays a major role in this special, but in this flashback, this is his first appearance as well. He dances for an uncomfortable amount of time, giving a really weird impression to everybody at camp, and he stops right next to Clam and Raj. Scoutmaster Lumpus is immediately sour toward him, but it seems like he can't do anything about it because he's a camper. He asks him why he can't just show up in a bus, and Laszlo says fruit trucks are just more fun. Slinkman shows Raj, Clam, and Laszlo their new cabin, but neither Raj or Clam seem super excited about it. We see immediately that Laszlo is super optimistic and Clam is willing to jump in. Laszlo says that he has a couple things in his bag that actually might spiffy up the place, and after it looks really nice and fresh, Raj is still skeptical about how weird Laszlo is.
Yeah, I guess he's a little weird.
Hey guys, you should see it out here. It's super cool.
Sri Lanka!
I haven't really seen this side of Raj before. I didn't realize that before Laszlo came along he was so bitter. Meanwhile, they go to their first camp activity in the lake, and Clam, Raj, and Laszlo actually slingshot themselves into it, which looks so much more fun than the regular Bean Scouts are doing. And while they're flying kites, they end up bringing out a plane, which is, I don't know how that's on camp rules. The more Raj, Clam, and Laszlo have fun, it seems like the more Edward gets fed up with them and is building this resentment. and it seems like he even is plotting to get rid of them.
Maybe they need a little helpful kick out the door.
Finally, it seems like Raj and Clam warm up to Laszlo, and he even makes them a nice tiki wood carving.
That's us! Laszlo, me, Clam, and a bunny and a gnome?
You know, it's interpretive. I needed a base.
I don't get it.
Laszlo hears the moaning of a bear and pretty much is like there's somebody in trouble, so he sets off to help it. It's a bear that's having trouble. As Laszlo goes out to find the bear, Edward uses the opportunity to tell Scoutmaster Lumpus that this monkey has broken the rules.
Do you realize what this means, Woodward?
Edward, that Laszlo will be kicked out of camp?
And I'll finally have control back.
Both of them seem excited now to kind of catch him in the act. Laszlo tries to get the bear to stay with them in the Jelly Beans cabin, and the bear looks so cute. The bear goes mad, scaring everybody in camp, and even Raj and Clam get fed up with Laszlo's caring nature toward this bear. With the distance growing between everybody, eventually all the campers are hidden out in Lumpus's cabin as Laszlo tries to tend to the bear. But it looks like Laszlo is being attacked by the bear and runs off.
Another bear mauling.
You guys, Laszlo's getting into it with the bear. Uh-oh, the bear's angry about something. Now the bear's chasing him. They're going. Whoop, can't see him anymore. They're gone.
Raj is through with Laszlo, and the first part ends on that kind of cliffhanger. Part 2 starts with all the campers coming out from under Lumpus's bed, scared of the bear attack. Slinkman says they have to do a head count to make sure that all the campers are safe, but this is unfortunately the perfect opportunity for them to figure out that Laszlo is missing. Samson runs out crying with Laszlo's hat and hands it to Slinkman, and everybody just assumes that he's dead. Scoutmaster Lumpus doesn't really care until it seems to affect him, and it turns out it's going to be his responsibility.
Scout manual, sir. If a camper happens to be devoured by nature, the Scoutmaster is held responsible. So I guess we should call hoo-ha-ha. Hoo-ha-ha?
Edward stands heroically on top of the Jelly Beans cabin to build on the lie that Laszlo is dead, and I don't know why this guy's so positive about it.
But then I leapt into action. It scared off the bear so we didn't take any more lives.
The entire camp starts looking up to Edward as this bear hunter since he quote-unquote defeated the bear, while Raj and Clam are depressed without Laszlo. They're eating buttered waffles all over the cabin and it's already ruined once again. Guys, this already looked disgusting. They have an encounter with Edward who says that it was a really sad thing to see him be eaten, but he doesn't look sad.
It's so sad about Laszlo, isn't it? I'll never forget the moment that black bear dragged him away.
And mentions it was a black bear, but Clam and Raj know it was a brown bear. They come to the realization that Edward is probably lying.
Edward's a liar! That is right, Clam! He's a liar! He never saw anything!
So they sneak off to find Laszlo and help him out. The next day, when they're doing a head count again, Slinkman checks where everybody is, and it turns out that Raj and Clam are now also missing. Everybody freaks out once again, and Edward takes it as another chance to look better for himself.
I tracked the very same bear to their cabin last night, but it got away.
There again.
Meanwhile, Raj and Clam go out on an adventure to find him, meeting a weasel on one of those push trains. They go up to him and try to get information, but when they mention monkey, he gets triggered because of that old famous rhyme, the monkey chased the weasel, and this part is actually my favorite part of the whole special, like them going through this giant train track that actually goes upside down like a roller coaster. The animation here looks just really cool.
Good luck running from that monkey.
Clam, that was a little too fun and adventurous.
They end up in this dead-end town with nobody in it, depressed that they can't find Laszlo and that maybe he is dead. They go to a nice restaurant and Raj is so disrespectful. He talks to the waiter staff like they're like nothing.
That's it. I am not going to have my one real meal in a month ruined by some nameless, inattentive servant.
Which is kind of a funny character quirk for him. Turns out that Laszlo is the waiter. He talks to the two campers and is like taking their order. Clam notices and the three reunite in the bathroom. So it seems like these guys didn't know each other up until this point, and it's nice because it's like they definitely grew their friendship through this. I definitely wish this was like the actual pilot because that would be cool. Laszlo says he's not going to return, and Raj and Clam are angry because he is the one that made them all excited about camp and suddenly he doesn't want to go anymore? I agree, it's out of character.
All that organized camping was cramping my style.
You're staying because of cramps? Ouch.
Well, that and I get to wear these cool threads.
There's a distance between the three, and it's actually kind of sad, but we don't have a lot of time to harp on it too long. Raj and Clam once again hate camp, returning alone. It seems like the camp is transformed into this, like, shrine to Edward, who keeps them all safe. And the bear that Laszlo was once helping is back. And obviously everybody still thinks that it killed Laszlo, so they're terrified. They run to Edward for support, but he doesn't actually have confidence. He's been faking it like this whole time.
What are you gonna do? Every scout for himself!
But they send him out anyway, and he is terrified, not able to communicate with the bear. The Scoutmaster comes to make an announcement, and it's clear that none of the management understand really what's going on here or what to do. If I was a camper here, I would feel in immediate danger all the time. But it's definitely the perfect opening to how he actually is, but like, this isn't the actual pilot, so it doesn't really matter that this is established.
That doesn't sound very much like a bear hunter.
Until Laszlo comes in, translates for the bear, and says that it's not really that big of a deal, he just needs to take the pine cones out of his nose. Once Edward does that, the bear thanks him, and thanks Laszlo. Clam and Raj run up to hug Laszlo, and the camp spirit is restored once again. Everybody's excited to see Laszlo once again, and are impressed with how he communicated with the bear. We leave this flashback when Laszlo enters the room to reveal that this whole thing, that Laszlo wasn't actually missing, and this was all a part of the flashback story.
Do we have to do this every time I go to the latrine?
But we love you!
You guys didn't tell that bear story again, did you?
Definitely one of those, and it was all a dream stories, which isn't super exciting. Now, I know I sound enthusiastic during this whole thing, but upon, like, really inspecting it, it doesn't really hold up as, like, a great special to me. Like, I'm sure you guys are gonna get mad at me in the comments, because Camp Laszlo doesn't have another special, but the fact that this is all they have is kind of disappointing. Like, I would have preferred not necessarily a flashback, but something that's going on in real time that we have real stakes for, because knowing that it's going to be a story from the very get-go is already assuming that things are going to turn out fine anyway. There's no real stakes immediately off the bat. And it's definitely working in an episodic structure, like it feels like there's 4 segments that continue the same storyline as opposed to one long Where's Laszlo episode. You know, like the first part is them all getting to camp. The second part is Laszlo fighting a bear and getting hurt. Then we get Raj and Clam's adventure to find Laszlo. And then finally Laszlo saving the day. When really it should have been like, we could have kept some of those flashback moments while it was going on in real time and really focused on Raj and Clam's adventure, because that's the most interesting part of this whole special to me.
Hello again. I'm sorry, but I just realized that I hadn't given you nice folks any ice in your water.
Thanks, Laszlo.
No problem, Clam.
The Edward storyline is really cool, but it could have built up to something more, like the entire camp being at risk more than just a bear. Like maybe we could have actually thought that they were in danger as opposed to like, oh, that bear was nice in the first episode, why would he go rampant now? And that moment when Raj and Clam are with the weasel, that is when I was like, okay, I am on board for this. But I shouldn't feel that way 30 minutes into the 40-minute special. Like it's already over at that point. Imagine if the SpongeBob movie didn't have them adventuring to get the crown until like the last quarter of it. Like that wouldn't be a movie. And it definitely tries to sell itself as a movie. If they were like, it's a 2-part episode, but they don't, you know, like they definitely are committed to this. And I feel like, I don't know, they could have did a better job. Overall, it was really nice to revisit the show after how long it's been and how hard these episodes have been to find. Like they're not available on any streaming platform. I may have found the DVD from season 1, but that's from another country. Like they don't even have any DVD releases here in America.
The monkey Sigmund, he's returned!
Returned? This is wonderful, sir. Now you can call...
So it's not really a good look, and especially being compared to SpongeBob, which has all of that and above, and while it isn't as quality as it used to be, it's definitely the most comparable cartoon to this. You know, an optimistic main character with his 2 best friends, and this is just not an exciting payoff. It's a shame that this was like the only one, because they could have done so much better. We learned a lot about the campers' first entrances, which I thought was really necessary, but I definitely don't think it was good to put it in this special. Like to me feels like they're trying to cram more time into a 40-minute special because they don't know what to do with it. And that also goes with saying the pacing of this is just so off for me. But I am looking at it as if it were a movie. But overall, Where's Laszlo was a pretty fun watch. I would definitely give it a 6 out of 10, but like for fun watch, it was like 7 out of 10. But how do you guys feel? Do you remember this special, and does any of these plot points ring a bell for you? I would really like to know, and if you disagree, don't comment! No, I'm just kidding. Leave it down below. I've been very nostalgic lately, coming across some of the best TV specials and movies from Cartoon Network. They've been doing such a good job. At least I thought they were doing such a good job until I revisited this show, My Gym Partner's a Monkey. It ran for about 4 seasons, and you'll be surprised with how successful it ended up being. However, there is one outlier that I think needs to be addressed. My Gym Partner's a Monkey's finale was a 2-part episode called The Big Field Trip, and it's listed as a TV movie, but I'll tell you what, if it's that, then I don't think it's good. I'm gonna tell you right off the bat. But if we look at it as like 4 separate episodes, or just a really extended episode, it's a lot better. But let's dive into it as a feature film, because that's what they said it was. So we start at the normal animal school with just Adam and Jake, our 2 main characters, chilling at the lockers. There's an announcement from the frog principal that the field trip is going to be happening soon and all band members are going to be a part of it. I don't think Adam is currently in the band because Jake tells him about the field trip and he doesn't seem interested. Adam admits that he plays the piccolo in a band, and Jake says it's obvious because of his facial features, which is already kind of offensive. And then we get this long-running gag where they're like, oh, you play the bassoon, right? Adam is like, okay, I don't think I'm coming. But then the teacher is like, oh, well, we're gonna need a bassoon player. The Frog and Mrs. Warthog talk about how she's gonna be driving the bus. As everybody gets on the bus, the armadillo comes on handing him his permission slip, claiming that now that he is giving it to him, they have a right to ask them for technically anything they want.
You now have permission to do with me what you will. Anything you want, I'll do it. Cause you got that there some permission slip.
And I already am nervous at the plot they're trying to set up here. It's a really funny bit though. The other teachers are getting ready to go on the trip, so it's gonna be a full ensemble feature. I forgot how funny the gym coach was, the little fish in the bowl.
Get that off my bowl, Horace!
The principal brags about how his sense of direction is pretty much perfect. There's this ongoing talk about how apparently last year it really didn't go well. I think it's because they got lost, but they're super vague about it, which is kind of funny. As all the main characters find their spots on the bus, it seems like it's finally time for the field trip. Poor Adam gets sick. I think it's really funny that he's this really sensitive kid, especially going to a school full of animals. Like, I would be disgusted at most of the things these people share. That's another thing I forgot too. When I'm seeing him look at this bag of puke, I'm remembering this show is a little grotesque. I mean, I know I talked about Flapjack in my worst episodes list, but this show seems to be a lot of gross humor because it's literally animals and humans. Like, obviously the humor is gonna be based on something those both find in common. Immediately, the navigation becomes a problem, surprise, surprise, as the bus literally heads into a cave that says do not enter and then do not exit, which is actually kind of funny. A brief montage where they're driving through multiple places, including space, occurs, and we're in danger. Miss Warthog suggests that they get out and ask for directions, but the armadillo, who claimed he will do anything that everybody wants, is saying he won't do it. So I guess now the principal and band teacher are gonna be the ones to stop and go and talk to the people in the gas store. Instead, they come out with all this Dutch supplies. I guess they didn't ask for anything while this entire bus of students was just waiting for them. I don't know why Miss Warthog just continues to drive, knowing it's just a random direction. Adam pulls out his piccolo, to which Jake says, you cannot play that on the bus. Obviously, Adam doesn't care because it's like, why? But already, why would you play an instrument on a bus anyway? Like, it seems like an inconvenience to begin with. But as he practices, all the animals fall asleep. And most concerningly, the bus driver. As they're heading off a cliff, everyone on the bus is asleep and we cut to a blackout. I'm already super stressed, and this is a good way to end a first part in a 4-part. I'm excited to see where this goes. Adam is in a bad mood, which I don't know how you have enough time for anger when you're heading toward a cliff. He's kind of talking about how he is on a bus with a bunch of sleeping zoo animals, which Adam, I think if you've even gotten this far, it's kind of on you. Before he could actually stop the situation, Miss Warthog starts to cuddle him. Everybody wakes up just in time to watch themselves fall off a cliff. There is no break, they just go completely off this cliff. Everybody is screaming and freaking out, as I would too. I'm scared of heights, so I kind of feel this. Turns out that it does not plummet, it actually just keeps going through the sky.
Yes, emergency jet propulsion. Standard on these Bratislavan beauties. Of course, they always have been gas hogs. No offense, Warthog.
None taken, Chief.
Fly until it runs out of gas and it just starts plummeting. Okay, that was an unnecessary delay. I think we could have just went on with that. They end up in this giant swamp-like forest. Everybody on the bus in the middle of this pond. It's broken down, and I feel like this is about to be a stranded situation. Everybody lays idly on the floor, with Adam more annoyed than anything. They compared to this pickle experience last year, where they went on a field trip.
It's a pickle.
And that seems to be a really average trip. I don't know why they would be scared of it, but it's just scary, I guess. The teachers kind of team up and try to figure out what to do with Miss Warthog not being able to leave the bus. Things take a really scary turn when the teachers and students see a bunch of rabbits. Why? It beats me. They're so cute.
Those aren't our students. They're wild animals.
Wild animals? Oh, crud.
Turns out it's because they are wild animals, and apparently wild animals and zoo animals have completely different ethics, which I think is a really interesting concept. You know, like we've seen these animals going to school with Adam for quite some time, and it's already been kind of like an with a quote-unquote fish out of water scene, but it becomes even further when even Jake approaches the animals. I don't know why they're so fearful, and they just keep running away, and there's a couple jokes that go on a little too long as this is happening.
If we work together, we can... If we work together, we can get the bus!
But I guess that's what the 40-minute specials are for, right? Jokes to be slightly longer than a minute now. Adam suggests that they all work together to get the bus out of the swamp and back onto the road. But because everybody's freaking out, nobody's really being helpful, so Adam starts playing his piccolo once again, making them all fall asleep. As they're all asleep, a little squirrel comes down, takes Adam's piccolo, and runs right back up the tree. This gives enough time for all the animals, both zoo and wild, to wake up and freak out. I love the idea that these animals would be more scared than even humans would be of regular wildlife. The main cast runs into a cave to hide, being cornered by this butterfly, and they are terrified. They find Luffy, who had not only befriended a butterfly, but she used it for her own benefit, being able to fly, which she could already do.
How'd you do it?
Well, we were locked in mortal combat. When suddenly I remembered the horrible Mr. Pickle.
But she's basically like, hey, if we could face that pickle last year, we could face anything. Meanwhile, Adam is trying to get his bassoon, or piccolo, back from this little squirrel, but it proves to be harder and harder as Adam is pretty much beaten up climbing up this tree. Jake doesn't help Adam as Adam confronts this little squirrel, and the squirrel outsmarts him, allowing Adam to fall down from a tree. Jake finally listens to his instincts, jumps off the tree, and saves Adam. I want to think that this is not a big deal because I swear in the TV show he's helped him from falling multiple times, but it does seem like this is a little bit higher stakes, maybe because it's a cinematic shot of him falling. I don't know. I just get a little bit more worried than before. Jake also manages to get the piccolo and Adam back to safe ground. They hug and make up, saying that everything is okay because it's just one chipmunk.
See, there's no reason to be afraid of a little chipmunk.
Yeah, but an army of chipmunks is a different story.
until we see an army of chipmunks corner Jake and Adam. And then we end on a to be continued. Okay, the stakes are getting risen. It seems like the original premise is being expanded upon. I think it's a really good special so far. Let's jump into the next part. So Adam and Jake are confronted with a bunch of squirrels in army hats because they're all obsessed with Adam's piccolo. I don't know why the piccolo is the center point for all the conflict in this special, but I'm just going with it. A giant owl starts to dial in on Jake and swoop in to get him until the sun interrupts, which I didn't realize this was a character in the show. Why? To blind the owl, making all these
"Don't worry, little one. If Adam won't save you, I will."
Wild animals assume that Jake is God. Jake steps on poison ivy and is almost infected before these little squirrels spray salve on him to comfort him. The rest of the main cast walk around this island trying to avoid conflict, but they slip on a banana, fall off a cliff. A lot happens in 30 seconds. They even lose all of their clothes and suddenly they are just as wild as the wilderness. No longer are they zoo animals, they are fighting for survival. There's a joke about how they are so far from actual civilization, but there's a highway actually behind these woods. And I kind of don't like this joke because it makes the stakes suddenly a lot lower. It's like we're really aware that they're not in danger and this is just a overreaction, which is already an episode-like device. I really wish they didn't use it in this movie, but whatever, I guess we're just gonna go as if that didn't happen. The teachers are all surrounded by these cute little bunnies as they try to come up with a plan. They talk about running onto the bus to get by these little cute bunnies. So the teachers are all plotting to get to the bus, but it's being blocked by all these cute little bunnies. It doesn't work, so they say that one of them has to volunteer to go out. All the teachers agree that the only student in the group will be the one to do it. Real responsible, guys. The armadillo is advocating to go out and talk to the little bunnies, and it's funny because it's exactly referencing the fact that he signed this permission slip. So these animals continue not to be a threat as the armadillo runs away, and all of them keep trying to approach the bus, but these cute animals just barely walk up to them, and it just feels like it's just the main characters scared of nothing. Eventually, the teachers actually fall into a giant trap and start freaking out in the ground. The trap is the one set up by the main characters who are in like survival mode, and everybody but the armadillo falls for it.
They got Henry.
No! Not dear little Henry! Ah, who am I kidding? Better him than us.
Look, man, you all need to just stay calm, like me.
You savages!
Meanwhile, Jake is living life as all these squirrels are tending to his every whim. Adam is annoyed that he's taking advantage of it, but of course he is.
Taking advantage of chipmunks is not communing with nature. Think about what you're doing.
Think. Blah, blah, blah. Boring. Adam, out here in the jungle, we have a motto. Too much thinking, and your corpse will be a stinking.
Adam is like, you're basically being a fraud right now. Eventually something worse is gonna come out and you're not gonna be able to protect these guys. But then he holds up his piccolo, which is Adam's, and all the squirrels defend Jake. Adam falls off the tree into a pile of mud when bears approach him. Actual threats. Adam remembers a lesson he learned in school about when being confronted by a large predator, and this is the one and only time it seems like a lesson from this specific school would help Adam in any scenario. I mean, thank God this actually has relevancy in this plot. Definitely gets its points for making the special better. The bears take Adam, and we don't know what happens to him. Meanwhile, Jake is actually approached by a king of the squirrels. Turns out to be an all-out war between the squirrels and the chipmunks. Sorry if I varied between chipmunk and squirrel for all of them over and over again, and Jake does not know how to solve it because he doesn't have a human brain. He attempts to by going ape, but becomes the enemy for all of the animals.
Use your brain to think. Cause more pain. Come on, you stinky bunch of rodents! Is that all you got? Let's see some real action! Hey, that worked even better than I thought.
The main characters run to the bus, as a new means of like civilization where they can live safely. While all the teachers are underground, they get in a fight about getting paid overtime. Like some of them are and some of them aren't, and it is the worst timing. Meanwhile, Adam tries to fit in with the bears, but does a really poor job. They dress up as Yogi Bear and Boo Boo and tell Adam to like kind of be cute and steal the picnic basket from the humans. I don't remember seeing a lot of other humans in this show. And as they finally steal and get away with it, the humans accuse Adam of tricking them. And suddenly Adam is more of a animal than he is a human. And that's really interesting because obviously he's growing up under this school facility, so I'm not surprised. Jake finally is out of conflict with the squirrels until an ugly squirrel comes along and the Squirrel King says that it's his daughter, feeling awkward and leaves.
Don't worry, King. I'll protect you. Ooh, this is your daughter, huh?
The bears bring Adam to their house where they use him as kind of like a maid. And suddenly Adam just works for this family of bears until he decides to get a piece of food himself. Then the bears go crazy and Adam runs away. He's saved by Jake once again, who is already himself running away from the squirrels. But now that Adam gets the piccolo back, he is able to kind of stand up against the wildlife. Everyone's concerns come true as the zoo animals and the wild animals team up all on each other, and Adam makes everybody fall asleep as he gets the Charles Darwin High students onto the bus and the wildlife separate. Finally, Miss Warthog continues the field trip, and when we think everything is normal, the chipmunks enter through the roof of the bus. Okay guys, I'm starting to get tired of this. Can we please just have a resolution? They finally arrive at their destination and Adam is angry because the big field trip is a trip to the big field.
This is our big field trip destination? The big field?
That's why it's called the big field trip.
Are you guys kidding me? It was all for this one joke. So everybody rests and chills at this giant empty field with their instruments. The band teacher gathers everybody and they start to actually play their instruments, which aren't actual instruments. They're interrupted when Adam makes a fart noise along with the group, and the band teacher is like, nope, you don't do it right. And that's where it ends. Okay, so this was a really, structurally, I think this was a pretty sound special. The Big Field Trip does a good job at keeping this feature-length story structure, but honestly, the way it's carried out is probably like really poor to me. I feel like they chose to focus on the least interesting beats of what could have happened. Like things like Jake being in charge of all the squirrels and the animals having a war with each other are really funny concepts, but they're just kind of like the most base level things happening in order for them to tell more jokes. It seems like the jokes are more important than the actual stakes being risen. So anytime there is a chance for things to get even a little bit serious, it just kind of avoids it altogether. Like if you took all the moments where, you know, like the other main characters, like the gorilla and the animals are just trying to find civilization, they're trying to find a place to live, instead of it like being actual things that risk their well-being or even them turning on each other, it just seems to end in them going for the bus or their rock tent falling apart or they're making a pun with the armadillo and accidentally trapping the teachers. Like nothing is risky, nothing ends up being a result of the plot happening. It's just a bunch of like minuscule events that are carried under the umbrella of this field trip happening, and nothing really is going on, if that makes sense. I'm trying to explain to myself why it could have such a impressive a setup and carry out with also still kind of not being super fun to watch, and I feel like there's just nothing emotionally pulling this story along. Like there's a good plot, but there's no story at all. And the fact that everything is kind of told with a butt of the joke up until the very last minute, I mean, I appreciate its consistency, but it just never takes me anywhere interesting. Like I could have turned this off at any point. It would not have felt like I was missing anything. The Big Field Trip definitely made me second guess if any show can adapt into a feature-length film, because this is not what I wanted it to be. I'm not sure if it's my nostalgia hoping that it was going to be better, but I didn't have super high expectations. Overall, the Big Field Trip, not a great one. 6 out of 10 for sure. And those 6 points are only coming from the fact that they timed this special out perfectly over the 4 episodes. I will give them that. If you're a fan of this show, then I think this must have played out perfectly. And as an objective critic of kids television, this didn't really do well for me. But what did you guys think? Do you remember this special? And if you do you remember how little happened in it? I'm really curious your guys' thoughts below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and for more 2000s content, don't forget to check out Johnny 2000. Okay guys, have a great day. Did you know that Ben 10 had multiple universes and different timelines? Because that was the first I heard of it when I watched Ben 10's Secret of the Omnitrix and Race Against Time back to back. I've always wanted to talk about Ben 10, but I never found the appropriate time to do it. So I kind of wanted to start backwards. I wanted to start with some of the most important moments in this series. And I learned a lot and had a fun time doing it. So let's get into it. What's up everybody? This is Johnny 2000 covering all 2000s content, media, video games, and more. Today, we're going to be talking about Ben 10 Race Against Time and Ben 10 Secret of the Omnitrix. So they made two very distinctly different Ben 10 movies. And these are two completely different concepts, let alone not talking about the fact that one is live action and one is animated. I feel like they're in almost two different genres. Unlike what the series has become now, they're so different. So let's jump into both of these movies individually, and I'll tell you guys some of the interesting facts I found online, and then let's jump into why they're so different. Let's start with Ben 10 Secret of the Omnitrix. So Gwen grumbles about how they were supposed to spend summer at the mall, but they're in the middle of another supervillain plot. Her and Grandpa Max are literally chained to the ceiling of a grimy villain lair warehouse, dangling over some weird-looking machinery. We see Dr. Animo, who's cackling, and he's talking about his latest evil invention, which is like a DNA bomb, which will de-evolutionize the world and turn humans back into prehistoric creatures. Which, you don't think COVID did that, bro? Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. In all seriousness. So Ben bursts in, except this time his hero transformations come with a fashion upgrade. He's making a flashy entrance, and of course, Animo is unimpressed and releases his latest abomination, a giant mutant Hymenopteron. It's so hard to pronounce, guys. Just bear with me. So Ben puts up a solid fight, but the creature keeps coming back, and Animo smugly points out that there's no way to shut down the machine easily.
Even you can't generate enough heat to melt that casing!
If I can't shut it down, I'll just have to turn it up.
So he does things his way. He unleashes a powerful fire blast, energy beam, and tries to sabotage the machine. Unfortunately, a siren blares and an energy wave surges, hitting Ben mid-transformation. The Omnitrix shorts out. I don't know what's going on. It's kind of like my stomach after Denny's. And just as Animo makes a quick getaway, Ben collapses into his human form. He finally defeats him and goes back to being himself. Gwen yells at him for doing this, not knowing what might happen, but Ben just says, "Can't be worse than if I don't do anything," which is going to be his reoccurring catchphrase in this.
What's up with the watch? I don't know.
The Omnitrix starts glowing orange and recharges itself. Weird, because it usually just shuts off. There's another action chase, and I keep forgetting how much kids like these action sequences, because I prefer to move on with the plot, but I guess we're just gonna watch Ben chase Animo, knowing that there's no way he could defeat him completely in this moment. And as Ben's Omnitrix goes crazy, Gwen is the one who ends up saving him.
You're really getting good at some of those spells in that book.
Practice makes perfect.
Gwen demands that they finally go to the mall like they planned. So Gwen's thrilled to shop, and Max wants to enjoy a smoothie in peace, and Ben is bored out of his mind like an easy Gen X kid.
Gwen needs a break from the whole battling bad guys and aliens thing, that's all. She just wants to feel normal again.
He literally does not know how to be chill. Come on. Gwen rolls her eyes at Ben once again, and the Omnitrix actually glitches, this time sending out a shockwave that actually knocks them into a store worker. The manager is angry and yells, and they're actually banned from the mall forever. And Gwen is super furious. It's interesting because Gwen and Ben's relationship is probably the most intimate in this show, and even though they don't necessarily respect each other, it seems like they're the first person to care about one another's problems, which is very humbling. And I like that the movie kind of focuses in on this relationship despite wherever it's about to go with its plot. So at 3:30, a blinding light comes outside the rust bucket. Ben is half asleep and assumes it's just some mall security revenge plot, but it's a giant spaceship instead. The pilot steps out of the spaceship and Ben prepares to go heroes, but a diamond shard pops up in front of him. It's Tetrix.
Good to see you again, Ben.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
Ben and Gwen are thrilled to see their old ally, but the excitement doesn't last long because he says he's picking up on an SDM signal from the Omnitrix. So SDM means self-destruct mode. Not just the watch will stop working self-destruct, it's going to explode, taking Ben and probably the whole planet with it. Ben now is panicked and asks how this could have happened, and Tetrix explains that something Ben did triggered it, and they have less than 4 days until it reaches 0. Whew. This is exciting. So Ben ends up going with Tetrix, but Uncle Max stays behind because it's too risky for any plumber to be recognized, and Ben is hyped for the space adventure in this sleek, futuristic ship, and Ben is like geeking out, having a great time, meeting the pilot Gluto, which is this blob who communicates through gurgles and enthusiastic wobbles.
I assume you're familiar with space travel protocol?
Oh, sure.
Later, Tantrix scans for Azimuth's DNA.
Azimuth is on Incarcicon, the prison planet.
The creator of the Omnitrix is in some space slammer?
And Ben is just trying to be useful. Ben tries to sniff out the intruder when he realizes that it is actually Gwen. Yeah, Gwen stowed away on the ship, and now Ben accidentally activates the escape route. Unfortunately, the countdown has only accelerated because of Ben's transformation. Okay, so he's doing even more irresponsible things. Obviously, Gwen is not happy, and this is another issue.
I just figured since Ben can't find his toothbrush when it's stuck in his mouth, he could use some help finding the creator. Hey, I'm just kidding. Ben never brushes his teeth.
The gang disguises themselves to sneak into the Incarceron, this high-tech prison planet crawling with dangerous criminals. While they're searching for Azimuth, Ben spots somebody who looks like Vilgax. He thinks it's his arch nemesis and impulsively transforms into Upchuck to attack, only to find out it's actually a female of Vilgax species, not him.
You're a girl!
Yeah, I know.
Meanwhile, 6-6 ambushes Tetrax, Gwen gets cornered by prisoners, and Ben's Omnitrix shorts out again, leaving him helpless. Gwen fights off prisoners with a metal pipe, and Tetrix rescues all of them. This new character reveals her identity. She's Myax, Azimuth's former assistant. Ben begs her to fix the watch, but she drops another bombshell. She's not the creator.
What have you been using this for? To open cans? Break rocks?
Sounds about right.
Azimuth is actually missing. And worse, she admits that the Omnitrix isn't just going to explode, it's going to literally rip the universe apart. Oh my gosh, then alien force, that won't happen.
Because I know where Azimuth is.
That's a pretty good reason.
Where?
Xenon.
Xenon.
So Xenon is cloaked in darkness by one of Azimuth's devices, and that's actually a really cool concept. To think this entire place is so dangerous that it actually has to be shrouded by darkness. Ben navigates through the asteroid field, and the Omnitrix actually has a homing signal which make it easier for them to get there. But unfortunately, everything is blocked when Vilgax's ship tears into theirs, sending bioids to attack. So Ben has to fight off all these mecha droids in a pod while Tetrix and Myax try to detach the ship. Gwen and Gluto fend off Vilgax inside the ship. Gwen pilots the hover simulator in a desperate defense, while Gluto heroically sacrifices himself to protect her.
You are going to regret sending me to the null void for what little remains of your miserable life.
Vilgax and Ben 10 finally have a one-on-one encounter here in space, and it is terrifying. After all the chasing, seeing them neck to neck running around the spaceship is just so isolating and really freaks me out.
I do not make deals.
That's okay. Neither do I.
Ben ejects Vilgax into space and crash lands on Xenon. However, the planet's not as abandoned as it seems. It's actually crawling with wild florana, which is wild vine species. It's kind of cool to see a little glimpse into that alien life form, but you know, it's not a safe situation for it. And they capture Gwen. Ben once again transforms into Four Arms in a desperate rescue attempt, but he fails to save her. He's distraught, lashes out in frustration, and feels horrible about himself because, you know, it's fair, he was warned multiple times. Tetrix tells him to keep moving, and they're getting closer to Azimuth's true location.
If you hadn't helped the creator make this stupid thing, then I never would have found it and Gwen would still be alive.
Ben.
I am a selfish and self-centered being, but it takes one to know one.
So Ben's devastated after Gwen's capture, and he's super silent, while everybody heads to Azimuth's possible hideout.
You okay?
Just wondering how I'm gonna tell Grandpa about.
I'm sorry. I know what you're going through. I was young.
He said when he was Ben's age, he said he was a selfish mercenary who worked for the highest bidder and even Vilgax. The worst mistake of his life was delivering the final piece Vilgax needed to destroy his homeworld. Oh, that's so depressing. Tetrak's guilt fuels his mission to stop villains like Vilgax, and we have a lot more insight onto him. Ben finally admits that he was reckless back at Animo's lab, and he was the one who might have triggered the Omnitrix self-destruct. But this time he's going about it with a more positive angle. He actually vows to make things right, not just for himself, but Gwen. And it's nice to see how much he cares for Gwen, because we never really see that in other episodes of the show. I mean, there's a lot of plots that resolve with their relationship, but it doesn't always go back to normal. And of course, there's a lot at stake right now with not only the Omnitrix about to explode. This is like a really, really tough pill to swallow for Ben. Ben and Gwen kind of remind me a lot of Jazz and Danny from Danny Phantom. I'm not sure if you guys get that relationship, but like the kind of bickering siblings, but also kind of have a shared responsibility of using this power that the main character has. I don't know, it seems like a similar show.
What are you doing with my Omnitrix?
My Omnitrix? You're the creator?
So security lasers scan the Omnitrix, activating a hologram of Azimuth. This grumpy, mechanical-looking guy is not happy, and he wants to know why Ben is messing with his Omnitrix before immediately shutting the doors in their faces. Ben is tired of everyone getting his way and transforms into Cannonball and barrels through the doors like a wrecking ball, which kind of seems like the character backtracking considering what we just learned. Ben confronts Azimuth, expecting this like grand wise inventor, but instead he's a tiny alien. In fact, he even looks like one of Ben's aliens.
Yeah, I'm a Galvan, so what? Does that give you the right to destroy my property and invade my privacy?
Enough talk! Stop the countdown!
He's convinced the universe isn't worth saving, and people like Ben and Vilgax are just going to keep using the Omnitrix as a weapon instead of what it was meant for, which is understanding all species.
You and Vilgax are no different.
That's not true! Sure, I've messed around with the watch, but I've helped a lot of people with it too.
Oh, interesting. So the Omnitrix is almost like an empathy provider where you could literally step into the person's shoes. But that's interesting. I guess, you know, like from somebody's perspective, Ben is a hero, but from another's, it's like he's just using power. Like even though he's doing these small saves, it might not be for the better of the universe. It might just be as destructive as somebody like Vilgax. Ben claims that he uses it for good, and before he could respond, the entire layer starts to shake. It turns out that Vilgax is back with an army of bioids and mechadroids as they descend from the sky and surround them. Azimuth is like super not in the mood and is like, why are you doing anything about this? But suddenly a giant spell blast explodes, and Gwen is there and he's alive. Ben is on the verge of tears, he tackles her, and this feels like a really rewarding moment because of how much we were convinced she was gone. And she explains that Gluto regenerated and saved her from Florina. Oh, thank gosh. That would have been a really dark reality to accept, Ben. Ben's blaster gets destroyed and he and Myax get overwhelmed, and there's no other choice, so Ben rips off his inhibitor, stopping the Omnitrix energy blast, and it explodes in a massive shockwave, wiping out Vilgax's forces, hopefully once and for all, and Azimuth finally deactivates the self-destruct button before it hits 0, and finally the universe is saved, but Vilgax is still standing. Oh gosh. As the villains close in, Vilgax is riding on one like this mech warrior, ready to take the Omnitrix. Gwen reminds Ben once again that he doesn't need the Omnitrix to be a hero. So Azimuth actually helps him, reattaches the dial, and instead of fixing it, he unlocks a brand new transformation. The Omnitrix starts glowing a blinding light, and Ben transforms into an enormous skyscraper-sized alien. With a single punch, this guy way big sends Vilgax flying as Ben laughs him off, and it's all done. Vilgax is thrown into space. We don't know where he's going or what's going on. The battle is over and the team regroups. We find out everything is good. Azimuth rebuilds the ship and offers to give back the Omnitrix to Ben. Ben is super grateful and surprised Gluto can speak English. Turns out he was insulting Ben the entire time. Awkward.
Oh, yeah. Not bad.
Who knew?
And Ben gets a new hoverboard as a parting gift. Meanwhile, there's a radio report of a zombie attack at the mall, And we feel a nice resolution as they get back to their episodic adventures. Finally, it ends on a really positive note. And it's nice because it's not like everything was concluded, but it allows the audience to have an imagination as to where Ben and Gwen would go from now on. I mean, an imagination. We don't really want to talk about pretending like we don't know Alien Force and Omniverse and literally all the sequel series. Like, there's no mystery to where these guys end up. But it was definitely a fantastic conclusion to this first series. Like, the first series offered a lot of surprises and fun with the Omnitrix and all the aliens it could transform into, and getting this final dive into its creator is the perfect way to end a series. As someone who only watched this series, like, I definitely feel like I would have been happy if it ended here. Apparently, Secret of the Omnitrix takes place in between the episode Goodbye and Good Riddance and Race Against Time, even though it kind of aired before both of them. And Race Against Time is an alternate timeline in the Ultimate Alien chronology. Now that we've covered Secret of the Omnitrix, why don't we switch gears and go into Race Against Time. So this is the live action version. Tara Strong, who was replaced by a real kid this time. Okay, at least it's getting taken seriously. So according to the pop-up trivia I actually learned from this, Ben has been back in Bellwood for a few weeks since his summer vacation ended. Since her family moved to a different part of Bellwood during the summer, Gwen is actually going to Ben's school now. Gwen has temporarily given up her real magic in an effort to try and get back to normal. Ben's aliens got famous over the summer thanks to news reports. Okay, so it's 2:59 a.m. in Bellwood, and a mysterious figure appears out of thin air in the town's main street, and we generally do not know who this guy is. He could be a street performer in purple for all I know. He immediately starts destroying things. Okay, so maybe he's not. Maybe he is an unfriendly street performer. We see Ben in the form of Heat Blast, and I'm already excited to see the first alien in live action in this special.
This is the part where you tell me your name, what your evil intentions are, yada yada.
And Heat Blast does not look too bad. I think some of the action moments are a little bit hard to watch and a little slower than we would expect, like from a cartoon to a live action, but Heat Blast looks cool, so I'm going to forgive it. After a very short battle, Heat Blast obliterates the villain and reverts back into Ben. The pop-punk rendition of the theme song, though, is a little weird. It feels a little off to me. I don't know what it is. The next morning, Ben's in school, and we finally get to see Ben 10's normal life outside of the TV series. I mean, there was an episode or two that showed it to us, but this is really fun to see it live action. Now it's all real. It's all for the first time. So he has trouble adjusting to his normal life again.
Heat Blast, the superhero in Bellwood? No way.
Actually, I heard he was Heat Blast too. He's pretty cool, isn't he?
He gets bullied by this guy named Cash and JT, and these two kids at the high school have a really funny banter between each other. And I didn't expect Ben to be this stereotypically bullied, but I think they did this a little bit in the pilot, so I'm not that surprised. We meet Ben's parents for real, and I'm telling you, they are like weirder in person. They are like hippie, angelic type people, and I just don't know how to describe it. It's just different than the show, I feel like.
Well, we were kind of hoping that you'd be finding friends your own age to play with.
Kids my own age are boring. Grandpa's fun.
They tell Ben that he needs to readjust to his life in Bellevue. So he actually attempts to do this by thinking of joining the talent show, but he doesn't know what to do, so he asks the girls to give him a talent. Ben, that is not what's supposed to happen. He assumes his talent's gonna be something with the Omnitrix until Gwen interrupts, thank gosh, because he almost ruined that. Saves Ben by saying they'll do the talent show together. Ben has a really hard time fitting in, even when he's chilling at the diner, and he goes into gray matter, another alien, second alien for this special. And then we have an excruciatingly graphic sequence of Ben turning into gray matter, and it is disgusting. It is graphic, it is uncomfortable. I don't want to see Ben turn into these aliens as realistically as they're trying to put out. And he causes complete chaos at this diner. And this is one of the repercussions that happen from Ben actually trying to use his Omnitrix to shortcut life, which is a really fun moment. Later, he and Gwen go over the same yearbook photos she took, and in the background of one of them, Gwen enhances a blurred spot to reveal the same villain that Ben defeated earlier. Max identifies this as Eon, an alien that the plumbers captured almost 2 centuries ago. How old are you, Uncle Max?
Took us many years to find out.
When he arrived, he was half dead and brought a device called the Hands of Armageddon, which opened a time rift to the alien's home dimension, and his plan is to unleash his race upon Earth when it's activated. The three Tennysons travel to a secret hidden containment facility where Eon is supposed to be kept in this suspended animation, but it's empty and his guardian is aged to near death. Before he dies, the plumber warns Ben that Eon is after him specifically. Oh my gosh, well, this is exciting actually.
Can't let him find the hardware store. Or the rest of the plumbers.
Grandpa, you said the plumbers disbanded.
We kept a handful active to watch over our things.
So they travel back to Bellwood, where Max takes Ben and Gwen to the location where the Hands of the Armageddon is. It's guarded by a few remaining plumbers ranging from Mrs. Dalton, Mr. Hawkins the postman, Fire Chief Whittington, and Principal Edward White. And it's really cool to know that the people in Ben's life that we've actually previously met in this film are part of this secret protection facility. Like, it makes me feel good that Bellevue is so pro-hero.
Why didn't you just destroy it?
We've tried, honey. Over the years, we plumbers have thrown everything we got at it. But the Hands have a way of deflecting us.
Eon follows them and breaks into the facility but can't activate the device. So Ben attempts to use his Omnitrix, but it malfunctions, glowing purple, refusing to activate. Like, what could this possibly be? It doesn't even look like the same way it does in the show. It seems like something different is going on, but I love to see it live. Eon manages to corner Ben, explaining that his race learned to control time itself, but accidentally trapped themselves by misusing their power. He claims that his fate is intertwined with Ben's. Oh, this is scary. Eon attempts to kidnap Ben, but Ben is able to escape. Max decides it would be best for Ben to leave Bellwood so Eon wouldn't find him.
Look at it that way.
If Eon wants the Omnitrix, he's gonna find me. It doesn't matter where I go.
Man.
You and the plumbers said that it's up to me now to protect the town. So let me. Let Eon come and find me here in Bellwood.
And they both come to a deal where Ben will be monitored daily by a plumber in disguise. The plumbers all around town are guarding Ben around the clock. Ben goes to school and somebody's watching. He's in gym, somebody's watching. This is where we get to some really quirky moments from Ben 10. And it's funny because a lot of the more fun and satirical experiences that Ben have is so much better in real life. Like seeing him interact with the adults, seeing him interact with Gwen, like it just seems like this world is so fun when it's silly.
Girls are assistants.
Times have changed, cuz. Don't worry, you'll look great in a leotard.
Things get more actiony or the aliens come out. This extra realism is a lot more harder to believe, but I do think it does a better job than any of the other Cartoon Network live action experiences in the past. And he's just paranoid that Eon could be anywhere. Suddenly Eon arrives again and shoves the principal out of his way. Ben has to transform into Diamond Head and fight him off.
Come on, let's settle this thing once and for all.
When an alarm sounds, the entire school gathers in the courtyard through which room, Benjamin?
Oh, man. Huh?
Later in that day, Ben decides to lure Eon into a trap by purposely leaving himself open. But this backfires, and he is immediately captured, along with Gwen and Max, and the rust bucket is destroyed. Wow. Okay, so everything is getting a little bit more intense. At the plumber facility storing the Hands of Armageddon, Eon explains some of the background of the Omnitrix. Ben can only remain in his alien forms for 10 minutes at a time, failsafe to prevent them from overwhelming his personality. Eon knows how to deactivate the failsafe, and in doing so can resurrect himself through the Omnitrix. So he does that, and he transforms Ben into a younger version of himself. Meanwhile, Principal White has gotten out of the nurse's office and finds the imprisoned plumbers. When trying to find a key to the room, they point out that the button near the door freed them. So Gwen and Max manage to free themselves and work to stop him. Max in the meantime tries to disable the time rift at the cost of his own life. Oh my gosh. We just met this live action Max and he's just as good as the cartoon Max.
Grandpa! Ben! Ben's hissing, you stupid idiot! Grandpa's in trouble!
Gwen appeals to Ben inside Eon. Ben is able to successfully overcome Eon, pressing the Omnitrix symbol after his cloak reverts him back into Ben, with the help of the other plumbers. They manage to save Max and disable the time rift, sending Eon's race back to their own dimension. Just when it seems like they won, time stops for everybody but Ben. The older Eon appears, angry at Ben's victory, and Ben transforms into Wild Mutt. Oh my god, there's still more battles. This is where it's getting over budget. Eventually, he knocks him into the hands of Armageddon, destroying both the hands and Eon. Okay, so I get it. We want a more conclusive ending. I'm on board now.
Hope nobody noticed that.
I don't feel so good.
Using the Omnitrix, Ben is able to make it look like he's just doing this as his talent. Wild Mutt reverts back into Ben, and he accepts being just himself for a while. He does not need to turn into aliens. However, Max points out that aliens are persistent, and as they walk off into the night, an alien ship flies toward Earth. The end. This definitely did a really good job translating the original series into what it had become live. I like that it's so different from Ben 10 Secret of the Omnitrix, because it's really hard to have really intense, important events happening back to back. I like that the first movie focused on Ben and Gwen's relationship, the second movie focused on Ben and this new villain. Like, they were able to take this episodic approach to the film while also rooting it in Ben's origins and not proving to be this one-off. This movie actually appeared in Poland before the first episode of Alien Force on the same day, which is kind of weird to me. This movie was actually originally canon to the prime timeline of the classic continuity. As a part of Ben 10,000 Returns, it's been retconned into an alternative timeline with many changes to the story, such as Eon now being an alternate timeline version of Ben instead of an alien, and the Cronians and Cronia no longer exist. The reverse happened in Ben 10 Destroy All Aliens, that other movie. The reason behind the name of the Rust Bucket 2 was because the original was destroyed in this film, and the current canon explanation is unknown. Some of Eon's previous attempts to control Ben prior to the movie were thwarted by the paradox, and it's kind of unknown if this holds true after Eon was retconned as being an alternate version of Ben. Darren Norris is Diamond Head. Darren Norris is the guy who plays the janitor on Ned's Declassified and Cosmo from Fairly Odd Parents, which is really random. Although Ben has stayed in his alien form for over 10 minutes before, it's never been with the failsafe purposely turned off. The weird energy fluctuations of the Hands of Armageddon make it impossible for Gwen to use her real magic. The hands needed the full power of the young Cronian to become activated. The hand's defenses dropped once again once it was powered on, and it made it easy to destroy, which is why it was easy to happen. The stage manager was actually played by the movie's writer, Mitch Watson. Carl is implied to know one of the plumbers, and the ships at the end of the movie are implied to belong to Vilgax, which is kind of cool. Overall, both of these movies share really special quirks. While Ben 10 Secret of the Omnitrix focuses on the relationship between Ben and Gwen and the action adventure they have throughout space, I feel like Ben 10 Race Against Time did a better job at fleshing out the world and turning it into a more cinematic experience that you could excuse to actually go to the theaters and watch, while Ben 10 Secret of the Omnitrix can lean more into the TV movie category. Both had amazing reveals and really great storylines. Like, they both were definitely objectively feature films. The cool thing about them is that each of the scripts work in its own way. Secret of the Omnitrix could not work in a live action way, and I don't think Race Against Time would be as interesting in an animated way. Making these unique experiences that really thrive off the format they were made in. So usually I'm a 2000s YouTuber, and Steven Universe is just barely off that era. But you know what? When I heard that they were doing a feature film, I was like, okay, Cartoon Network must really believe in this. Maybe I'm gonna have to take another gander. Because as you know, they usually only do movies when it's a finale or a very specific event, like the Powerpuff Girls or Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. It's not saying where's Laszlo as if it's this big special. It is saying the movie, therefore it is fully committed to it, and I respect that. When I heard this was a musical, I was excited. Honestly, if it wasn't a musical, I don't think I would have watched it. Just the fact that they have the gall to make a Cartoon Network movie again, but this time be a musical? Okay. Definitely the expectations are a little high already. But you know what? I don't know anything about Steven Universe, so I'm gonna try to go in with a clear mind. I've heard occasional things about the animation not being up to everybody's standards. Maybe Steven's character development being a little too honest than realistic. But having seen a lot of Cartoon Network movies lately, I'm definitely down to give it a shot. So let's begin Steven Universe, the movie. So in the beginning of the movie, we are reminded of what makes Steven Universe unique, Steven specifically. And if you're me, who actually didn't really watch the show before this movie, really needed this part. And I like that they're kind of catching you up, because that's the issue that TV movies like to do, is they like to throw you in like another episode and just jump into the plot. But this seems to actually be taking the time to tell a beginning, middle, and end narrative, which I'm already happy about. So the Diamonds are telling the story of Steven, and White Diamond announces that all the gems in the entire universe, that Steven Universe is finally ready to fulfill his mother's role as a new leader. Apparently, Steven's mom is a gem monarch of the Great Diamond Authority, and this has always been an expectation that he would take the rightful place on his mother's throne.
You don't have to put me on a throne. I already have a rightful place, and it's on Earth.
What? So Steven's greeting the citizens of the Gem World and all the other colonies through broadcast, announcing that he already has a rightful place, and it's Earth, where he lives with his friends. Once he dismantles the Empire and saves all the planets, he can't wait to go back home and spend time with them instead of taking on this huge responsibility. So after the broadcast, the Diamonds actually keep trying to persuade him to stay and fulfill Pink Diamond's role as the leader.
Just let us adore you.
But he keeps turning it down, like he does not want to take the offer. So back on Earth, Connie welcomes Steven back and asks what took him so long. Steven feels tired and embarrassed that the Diamonds wanted him to rule the universe 24/7 and he didn't take it. And he says goodbye to Connie as she's apparently heading off to space camp. But it's very sweet because it's very clear that he had a crush on her. And he's just, everything seems to be coming to an end, as things do when you grow up. He tries to embrace the peaceful life he's gonna live alongside Pearl, Garnet, Amethyst. Like, they're all excited to celebrate their new happily ever after.
What do you think?
If I could just stop right here and be finally done, finally us, finally we are in the future. Here we are in the future, and
The song Here We Are in the Future is just so good at capturing the relief Steven feels about this new era of his life, and the song is just so vibrant. And they catch us up on some more of the lore, and it's such a natural way to do it too. Although immediately, a giant drill lands on the hillside of Beach City. A deranged, cartoonish gem that's like nice and pink and kind of looks like she would be out of My Life as a Teenage Robot appears. Fair warning, I call her Spinel instead of Spinel a lot of this review, so get over it. No, I'm just kidding, but please forgive me. And she basically says that her intention is to kill Steven specifically and the rest of life on Earth.
Story over and over again. Gee, it's swell to finally beat her other friends.
Okay, this sounds like a nice reason to have a full-length film. Using a scythe-like weapon, she poofs Pearl, Garnet, and Amethyst. But right before she's about to do the same to Steven, his body is unharmed. Turns out that he doesn't poof as easily as the other gems do. So Spinal mocks Steven, saying that his human half will not withstand her injector, but Steven actually snatches the scythe and poofs her. Exhausted, he tries to bubble Spinal, but fails in the process, noticing that his gem is not functioning properly. Back at the beach house, Steven calls his father Greg for help, and he is just as shocked and confused as Steven. Greg is certain, though, that in the matter of seconds, the gems will regenerate, and he's right, the gems come back, and we're not super worried about it. But apparently they obtained their primary clothing from their first formations, which is kind of funny. In addition, their memories have been erased, with Pearl assuming that she is Greg's servant. Even Spinal regenerates, but as like a goofy, happy-go-lucky gem, whose sole purpose is to entertain her best friend, Steven.
Not mad? Mad? Why would I be mad at my best friend?
Steven and Spinal take Ruby and Sapphire to seek advice. They try to seek advice from Peridot, Lupus Lazuli, and Bismuth. And it's interesting because they're going back to their original states, which is kind of a metaphor for being a child, like before you have the knowledge and comprehension of what the real world is like. It's like your little default state, like your childlike persona. And I like that we kind of have a new character to get used to, even though they're in the same bodies as their series counterparts. So Bismuth identifies Spinal's scythe as a rejuvenator, which is a device that can reset the mind of a gem back to when they were first created. Oh, okay, so maybe I am right. Since Steven is a human hybrid of a gem and doesn't poof, and he's discouraged from the loss of his powers from his gem half taking the hit, making him feel like he went right back to the start of when he was struggling with his powers originally. The three of them encourage Steven not to give up, and Spinal compares the situation to a puzzle, suggesting that they find the gem's missing pieces to restore their memories, inspiring Steven to try and reenact Ruby and Sapphire's first fusion. Steven thinks of a dangerous situation that would cause Ruby and save Sapphire from getting hurled, but even while trying to reenact that sort of situation, he cannot bring himself to actually hurt them.
Permission to dispatch the curly-haired one by Sapphire.
No need. I predict he won't be able to follow through.
She's right. I can't.
It's really interesting to think this one character is two individual characters, but it definitely adds a complexity that I am here for. Meanwhile, Spinal's antics cause scaffolding to collapse, almost crushing Ruby, who has no regrets of getting shattered within a day, until Sapphire shoves her to safety and the pair fuse into Garnet back to normal. But she's questioning everything. She's not like the same as she used to. She has no memory of her life, and even though her body is back to normal, there isn't a magical fix to this, and that becomes like a really heavy burden on Steven. After finding Amethyst, Steven attempts to reenact the same experiences those two had together. Successfully, Steven recovers Amethyst's memory, which is awesome, and Peridot discovers that the drill is injecting a toxic chemical that is trying to kill all organic life on Earth. They come to the conclusion that Spinal would be the only one who knows how to remove the injector, so they need to bring her memories back in order to stop this. And finally, a countdown clock is brought on, and the stakes just get risen higher. So not only is there emotional issues going on, they have to solve a problem within X amount of time. Steven remembers back when Spinal attacked them, Pearl seemed to know who she was, so they need to revive Pearl's memory first. So they take her to a concert of Sadie Killer and the Suspects and hopes their music will bring back the memories of rebellion. But Pearl says that as long as Greg exists, she's just going to obey him. She's dependent on this person and just continue to serve him and not become an individual like she's known as in the series. Steven uses what little energy he has left to fuse with Greg.
It's a big old universe out there. And when you're getting crushed under the weight of them stars, well, sometimes you need that special someone to remind you that you're so much more.
And enables Pearl to recover her memory. And it's a success, but Steven is shown to be way weaker and sees Spinal, who is overcome with sadness, and she flees. Pearl rushes to his aid and informs Steven that Spinal was once Pink Diamond's playmate in her garden, and she hasn't seen her for 6,000 years. Steven tries to catch up to Spinal while riding a lion. After sending the lion to retrieve Connie from space camp, Steven finds Spinal crying at the conservatory in his house. She explains that she started experiencing familiar emotions, which Steven is aiming for, when she remembers the Pink's garden. She smiles briefly and then activates the warp pad in frustration. Spinal takes Steven to the desolate garden in space and reveals her backstory.
Happily waiting, all on my own, under the endless sky. Counting the seconds, standing alone, as thousands of years go by. Happily wondering.
She was Pink Diamond's playmate until the other Diamonds gave Pink her own colony. So Steven's mother she used to spend a lot of time with. She's eager to go to Earth with her, but Pink told Spinal to wait for her in the garden as if they were playing a game. But she stood there for 6,000 years, and this is probably the best song in the entire film. Spinal learns that Era 3 has begun and Pink Diamond's fate through Steven's broadcast at the beginning of the movie. Remembering Pink's betrayal, Spinal regains her memories completely and reforms back to her deranged version of herself that's pretty much evil. Steven understands everything now and tells her that she isn't the only person Pink has hurt. He tells Spinal that she should and will eventually find a better friend who won't hurt her. And at that moment, she believes that she found the friend she was looking for. And this is a really beautiful moment, especially showing the power of Steven Universe and acceptance. Like, having this girl have an abandonment issue is just so relatable to Steven, and it feels really fulfilling to see him try to address this problem through someone else. Back in Beach City, Spinel turns off the drill, and Steven starts to shift his attention back to everyone else. She accuses him of just using her and abandoning her like Pink did.
My back is turned, bam, presto, chango, problem solved. Well, think again. You're not getting rid of me that easy.
So she's paranoid. She turns the drill back on and attacks Steven. As he tries to explain the truth to her and breaks the rejuvenator, Garnet recovers her memory. Steven sends out the other gems to rescue the humans of Beach City while he confronts Spinal alone. And it's this big epic moment where the two good and bad characters finally face off, and everything is coming to a climactic battle with the entire Beach City about to go under, and even the space at risk, with Steven being at the center of all of it. Spinal punches Steven and expresses her rage by nearly dropping Steven off of her injector. Not understanding why his powers aren't working, Spinal mocks Steven as to how he used to save the entire universe. But Steven realizes why his gem powers haven't returned.
All those struggles, I learned from them and I grew. Oh my gosh, it's not just my gem powers I've forgotten. All this happily ever after stuff has made me forget the first power I ever had. The power to change.
It's his desire for not changing and his happily ever after at the resistance in the beginning of the movie, just avoiding growth and change. That is what's stopping him being able to keep his power, so he can either move on or restart life, because there is no other option. Embracing this fact, he regains his powers and is finally able to battle Spinel. He's still stubborn and fed up with his singing, and Spinel punches Steven right toward the top of the injector. She vents out her rage even further and then realizes that compared to Pink, Steven liked her better than she ever did. And this devastating conclusion that hurting Steven won't make her feel better, like, hits her hard. The injector starts to explode, but Steven and Spinel are unharmed thanks to the bubble. Steven's given the idea to use his healing powers to restore the planet's ecosystem, but only by a small portion. After Spinel apologizes for the mess, the diamonds suddenly arrive. He introduces Spinel to them, and they take immediate liking to her and her goofy personality. And the diamonds accept her in place of Steven, and she happily goes with them, with the people who will love her unconditionally. This really nice, like, reformation and gathering of old friends that makes you feel really nostalgic, and I like how they really emphasize that emotional depth to this moment. Steven and his friends gather to rebuild Beach City, thanks in part to Steven's healing powers and undoing the damage of the poison, and the ocean starts to dissolve it, and everything is beginning to be rebuilt. And we end with a dinner party where Steven, Pearl, Garnet, Amethyst, Connie, and Greg perform this finale song, which is just as good as the other ones. Overall, Steven Universe, the movie, is surprisingly independent of the show. Like, you don't need to know everything that's going on. I mean, the lore is super necessary to have the emotional depth, but even as somebody who hadn't seen any of it before, I felt for these characters. I felt caught up immediately off the bat, and I didn't fall for a beat. It didn't of course, the songs that played throughout it were so gorgeous that I was always reminded of the familiarity of the show, which also helped. And I like that there's this, like, certain style to it, this beachside calmness to their music that is able to happen even at the most darkest song to the most positive song at the beginning of the movie.
You will always have me. At the end of your road. I'll be holding you tight. I'm gonna be right by your side no matter what.
The movie was executive produced by Cartoon Network and, of course, Rebecca Sugar, who created it. She was also the film's director. The movie seems to take place over May 21st and 22nd, as seen on the Sadie Killer in the Suspects poster. Given Steven's birthday is August 15th, that would mean Steven is 16 years old, 9 months, and 6 days old in this movie. They confirmed that the movie actually takes place 2 years after Season 5, and a little bit before, or the Steven Universe Future series. This film actually holds 100% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. I also liked the general theme of like stories themselves interspersed throughout the songs. Like the opening number, Tale of Stephen, features a storybook of the show's history and the plot, kind of like opening of old Disney movies, and gives you that nostalgic vibes. And the arc words like Once Upon a Time, Happily Ever After are things that keep getting repeated throughout the movie and either stops or encourages Stephen from making an important decision. And that's kind of how you know it's really wrapped into the theme. This is actually the first time a gem initially has intentions on killing Stephen. Additionally, there was a cut tap dance sequence apparently with Stephen and Amethyst from this cut scene called No Matter What, and I wish I could see that.
When you're hitting the hay, I'll be hanging around. If you like it or not, I'm gone.
The movie was actually shown in select theaters on March 23rd in 2020, but you know, the COVID outbreak kind of got in the way of that.
Okay, let's look at this from a critical eye. As a musical writer myself, I view musicals a very specific way. 1, they have to progress the plot, and 3, they have to be fully committed to this. There's some movies that say they're musicals but only put a couple songs out, Wonka, when really a musical is when the story can't work without the music. And Steven Universe does such a good job at making this a part of the plot, not only with the themes that the show's based off of being integrated, like this happily ever after idea, this whimsical fantasy aesthetic that Steven Universe is known for, but it knows how to use the characters in the songs to take everything one step further. Like for example, Spinell's villain song is one of the most catchiest songs I've heard in general.
Gee, it's swell to finally meet her other friends. That's right, I heard the story, don't really like how it ends. Gee, it's swell to finally meet her other friends.
They also coincidentally have such short lyrics that foreshadow so much, like when Spinell's talking about how Stephen is one of quote-unquote her other friends. Not only that, but she also establishes her backstory and her intention against Stephen, something that could have been done with a little bit of dialogue, but the song was needed in order to convey this. Steven Universe's art style complements the music so well because it's like a music video, you know, like I recently did a video about the Fairly Odd Parents Schools Out musical, and this has all the best elements that implemented. If anything, that would have been better if it was given a feature-length film like this. This is the peak of what musical films should be. And I think this could have worked just as easily with a Pixar or Disney format, and that's how you know it's doing something right. Overall, Steven Universe the movie, definitely a 9 out of 10 for me. This is no TV movie. It's a really well done musical on its own, and you can jump right in no matter what.
Be right by your side. Be right by your side no matter what.
Oh, come on, guys. I had to do that. That was a pun. It was a pun in a song. I had to do it. But how did you guys feel about the movies? Did you like it? And do you think I should do a ranking system now that I've seen most of these movies? Please let me know what you think below. And until then, for all your 2000s nostalgia, don't forget to follow me, Johnny2000. Have a great day. At the risk of sounding like a war veteran, I've seen some good crossovers in my day. Yeah, I'm joking, but it's actually really serious. Yeah, I've seen some really good crossovers, and I'm really just talking about the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour. Like, that definitely set my expectations super high for any crossovers with TV shows. I know Butch Hartman did a little short crossing over Danny Phantom and his other shows too, but it was kind of underwhelming. It made me realize it's actually really hard to do one of these and do one of them right. And you know what? There is a prime example. As I've been going through all these Cartoon Network shows, I've noticed that they have a different way of going about crossovers and such, in a way that's very distinct from Nickelodeon. You know, Nickelodeon made events out of these crossovers. I know more recently they had the Title Zone, which is SpongeBob crossing over with itself, which I don't think counts. Jimmy Timmy Power Hour, like, they never had the characters in the same atmosphere before that. Cartoon Network is a little bit different. Like, Ed, Edd and Eddy might occasionally have a Billy and Mandy reference. I know Foster's Home had a Ed, Edd and Eddy reference, and I saw Mandy be in Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends before. Like, it seems like they're separation of universes is a lot more fluid than Nickelodeon's. That's gotta mean some good and some bad things at the same time. I mean, personally, I'm not seeing a lot of positives, but I admire that they work a lot closer together and the universe is a little more conjoined than the normal one. I remember hearing about the Kids Next Door crossover with Billy and Mandy before. Not sure if it was a commercial or what was going on, but I remember it happened. And not just as a one-off joke, they had a full episode about it. Sure, Jimmy Timmy Power Hour thought it needed to take an hour to do it, but I guess Cartoon Network, if you think you could fit this into a half-hour episode, go ahead. So without further ado, let's dive into the grim adventures of the Kids Next Door. So weirdly enough, this is not a double episode. This is not a feature film. This is a 20-minute special. And I mean, is it special if it doesn't necessarily have any big event going with it?
You just keep an eye on things while I'm gone. And keep your filthy mitts off my pants!
This actually shares a timeline with Billy and Mandy's Big Boogey Adventure because number 3 was chosen as the acting Reaper when Grim was actually fired in the special.
Who's gonna be the Grim Reaper if I'm not the Grim Reaper?
Oh, hey there! It's me, number 3. I just wanted to thank you, Boogey, for giving me this opportunity. Thanks to you, in addition to my charity work and love of rainbow monkeys, I can now also reap the immortal souls of grown-ups, collecting my dark harvest with a cold iron blade. Yeah, that'll be fun!
Since it doesn't follow along with Billy and Mandy's continuity, it's considered non-canon, which is kind of disappointing. It does, however, take place after the events of codenamed Kids Next Door movie Operation Zero, because the new KND moon base is being shown. Oh, it's cool because Mr. Warburton is called Maxwell Warburton, which is a mix between Maxwell Adams' name from Grim Adventures and Mr. Warburton from KND, which is it's really cute to have that combo. Coincidentally, these shows are both the winners of the Big Pick from the Cartoon Network Cartoon Fridays block. I know that some of the kids from the codenamed Kids Next Door are seen in Ennsville with the kids from Billy and Mandy, but it's unknown how they'd even got there. But you know what, I guess they're just trying to combine the worlds, so that's fair for me, I guess. So when Harold leaves to buy underwear, Billy wears his dad's lucky pants, despite being told not to. Billy accidentally gets Grim's scythe stuck in his pants in a really off-putting way. Weird way to start off this crossover, guys. And needs help fixing them before his dad gets home. He calls Ed and Eddy's pesky problem fixers.
Got a problem that's pesky? We'll fix her for just 1 lousy quarter. What do you mean you're broke? Hey, if you're looking for charity, call Kids Next Door.
But Billy doesn't have any money, so Eddy tells him to call the Kids Next Door since, quote-unquote, they're cheap. This is already a really funny reference. Like, immediately I was worried because I was like, oh, it doesn't seem like, this doesn't really feel like a crossover. It feels like a Billy and Mandy episode, but the fact that they called them right off the bat is already funny. But if you guys already had the Ed and Eddy, why didn't you just incorporate them in it too? Whatever, missed opportunity, but it's beyond me, I guess. When the KND arrive to fix the pants, they find out that they need 2x4 technology, so number 1 dresses up as Billy to prevent Billy's dad from finding out about his pants.
Wow, great disguise, number 1. You look exactly like Billy.
That is Billy.
Why do you have a tomato strapped to your face?
Number 1 is just insistent that he's like one of the best undercover people, and it's really funny because I'm curious how this is going to translate to the standards of Billy and Mandy. Billy and Mandy is a lot more existential and dark and has things happen for the sake of humor, and Kids Next Door definitely has like a more grounded approach to their stuff. Like, they usually end on a good note. They seem to follow more logic than Billy and Mandy. So yeah, number 1 insists on staying, while the rest of Sector V take Billy to the KND Deep Sea Lab to fix his pants. Meanwhile, Mandy shows up at Billy's house and immediately knows number 1 is not Billy.
No, you're not. What have you done with him?
I told you. Hey! Stop that!
I love how number one actually attempts to convince her that she is, you know, knowing that number one doesn't actually know who this girl is. And I like how he seems so sure of himself right before this. And of course, Mandy of all people showing up. This is like ridiculous. She ends up capturing number one and tortures him until he tells Mandy what's going on with the candy. And we actually feel real concern for Nigel Uno because we know that the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy can get really dark and death can easily happen in this. So I immediately am worried about it because those kind of stakes don't easily translate to Kids Next Door, which is a lot more grounded. Meanwhile, the rest of Sector V are flying to Billy in the deep sea lab when they get an urgent message from number 362. She's informing them that delightful children from down the lane, their usual enemy, are using a delightfulization machine. What? How did they make that up? And they are going to turn children into their delightful slaves. Sector V reluctantly takes Billy on the mission because that's more important, I guess, and
Pretty lights! Does this one make pudding? Wow! Let me try that!
Billy mistakes the delightful machine for a bathroom. Oh my gosh. This is funny though, because they take Billy's stupidity to a whole new level when it's actually on a serious mission to interfere with something like this.
Excuse me, are you in line for the bathroom? Why, no!
Like, that's a really funny crossover. So it ends up fusing him, the Lucky Pants, Grim's Scythe, and the Delightful Children into the Delightful Reaper, a giant version of the Grim Reaper containing all the Delightful Children and Billy in this instance.
Hey! Can you guys slow down? Just talking at the same time is really hard.
An odd combination of people, for sure. Meanwhile, Grim comes to Billy's house and mistakes number one for Billy, which is ridiculous. And you actually fell for it?
Billy, give me back my scythe!
I keep telling you I'm not Billy, and I don't have your stupid scythe!
I ain't falling for that, Billy!
Grim falls to the ground, saying that the horrible children have fused with his scythe and that he feels that they're strangely evil and delightful. So Grim doesn't really know what to make of this, and it's probably the one and only instant where the Grim world reacts to the K&D world like it's weird. I mean, for the most part, the K&D are the ones in the strange territory here. So Sector V returns to the moon base where Mandy is disguised as number one. So she comes out and she's like, I'm number one. And Mandy looks nothing like number one. She's not even bald. But only number 5 seems to pick up on the fact that she's an imposter. Mandy convinces everybody that number 5 is actually crazy and losing her mind.
This isn't number 1. So who are you?
Obviously, this girl is delirious after her last mission, sir. Perhaps she should be taken down to the med lab while I explain the situation to you.
Good idea, number 1.
Say what?
I didn't realize that the Kids Next Door world was going to be this naive to this, but they genuinely like lock number 5 away as like a mental patient. Soon Mandy actually becomes a ruler of the KND, renaming it the MND, the Mandy New Dictator, which is not clever. Number 1 and Grim arrive to the moon base where Grim finds out that number 1 isn't Billy and Mandy imprisons both of them.
It's Billy!
Don't be ridiculous, number 3. And what have you done to our moon base, Mandy?
It's just always weird to me how Mandy is somehow the antagonist but the main character a lot of times. Like, she just switches to its convenience, and I can't tell if it's a good writing choice or a bad one. Like, I can't tell how intentional it is. Especially in moments like these where we're taking 2 shows and are aware of the good people on both shows, and then she makes a switch. Like, I wish she was at least on their side with this, like she was in the Big Boogey adventure. So the Delightful Reaper actually starts to assimilate children after escaping. Number 1 and Grim decide to fuse together and become the Bone of Barnacles and create a giant skeleton samurai to battle the Delightful Reaper and Mandy.
Let's do this.
Sunglasses? Are you going to a fight or a fashion show?
Just get on with it.
If you say so.
The giant manned robot, which is piloted by Mandy, number 3 and number 4 come into the battle as well. Mandy's robot begins to lose until number 1 and Grim show up to fight the Delightful Reaper. Okay, so I guess number 1 and Grim from Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy are the 2 morally correct characters. I'm losing track of all of this. Harold's Lucky Pants are impervious to lasers, apparently. Oh my gosh, so these pants are special, I guess. I feel sad that we don't get to see Billy so much. Like, I would wish this was a longer special just so there's a little bit more intention behind it, because so far it feels like we kind of got a moment with every main character and it petered off into a plot that became more joke-ridden, as opposed to anybody having a character arc that's consistent. Like, it's an ensemble show that just ends with no plot. When the Delightful Reaper is distracted by Number 1 and Grimm, Mandy purposely fuses herself with the Delightful Reaper, giving her control of all of it, and she is trying to destroy Number 1 and Grimm. However, Harold arrives, which is so random, and he demands the return of his Lucky Pants. Harold removes the Lucky Pants and takes them away.
I wear the pants around here. Me, my pants. Me.
Without the Lucky Pants, the Delightful Reaper, controlled by Mandy, is defenseless, and the Skeleton Samurai finishes it off, freeing all the kids inside of it. Mandy is taken away from the kids next door, and eventually she escapes, vowing revenge, even though this will never happen, and the special is pretty short, and everything goes back to the way it was except for Number 1.
You are in big trouble for taking my Lucky Pants, Billy.
But I'm not Billy.
Oh, I'm not falling for that one again, mister.
Who gets dragged away by Harold, believing him to be Billy, and he is punished. Okay, so at least one thing worked out for them. And Billy, who pretends to be Number 1, only for everyone to not be fooled at all, and they throw things at him, which is a really funny note to end on. I hate that this entire thing just feels like a joke. It feels like the 5-minute crossover that happened with Danny Phantom and Fairly Odd Parents quicker than it feels like the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour. It feels like the stakes, nobody's really at risk in this. It just seems like something was invented for the time being, and it doesn't affect internally or externally any of the characters involved. If anything, this special could have been done by a bunch of kids online and putting it together. I'm a little ashamed to think this is official, because it could have done a lot more justice in this. Hey, even That's So Sweet Life of Hannah Montana did it better, and Hannah Montana wasn't even in the first 2 parts of that special. All around, this feels like a giant waste of time. If anything, I would like to see Flapjack enter Chowder's world. Maybe regular show go into Adventure Time. Anything beside the 2 most wacky shows with the most unnecessary plot points. I definitely think I might have seen this when I was little, but didn't remember it on purpose, because this was not interesting. I think at best, it's one of the worst episodes of both shows on their own right. They cancel each other out, nothing feels memorable, nothing feels like it matters, and it feels like we're all just telling one big joke for a half hour. I mean, it happens so quickly. Like, within 5 minutes, I think they have the characters crossing over, none of them eager to get to know one another, nothing builds up to anything. If you guys ever come across this special, I recommend not to watch it, honestly. Honestly, it brought the quality of both shows down a little bit for me. Makes me feel like they didn't really care that much, especially when I'm thinking about the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour and how they had to go to great lengths to kind of cross over the different animation styles. Like, this didn't only not do that, it also, I don't know, it was a less quality version of the episode. But hey, feel free to disagree with me. I'm the 2000s content expert, which I'm not claiming to be, and I say it wasn't so great. But you know what? I'm totally open to new opinions, new perspectives. Go off, tell me what you think. Some of these jokes were definitely well worth it, but honestly, in the small instances that Ed and Eddy shows up in other shows, or Mandy shows up in one of the other Cartoon Network shows, those are instantaneously better than this entire special as a whole. But thank you guys so much for watching. This is Johnny 2000, and I'll see you guys next time.